Gentlemen, I would like to call to order the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for October 8th, 2018. If you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Zachary Urban,
Present.
Monica Duran,
Here.
Tim Fitzgerald,
Here.
Christy Davis,
Here.
Janice Hoppy,
Present.
Leah Dozeman,
Here.
George Pond,
Present.
Larry Matthews.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Councilors, in your packet, you have the City Council minutes for the night of September 10th, 2018, and study session notes of October 1st, 2018. Are there any corrections or clarifications? Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to point out that in the study session notes of October 1st, I, Janice Hoppy, was listed as both present and absent. I was absent at that meeting.
The clerk will take care of that. Any other corrections? Then the minutes will stand as corrected. Would Ms. Joyce Manwaring join me at the podium?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Come on up. Thank you. I'm pleased this evening to have the opportunity to recognize Barb Cloverdance, our aquatic supervisor. Barb was recently recognized by the Colorado Parks and Recreation Association at their annual conference as Aquatics Professional of the Year. This award is both nomination and selection is by fellow peers, fellow aquatics professionals that work across the state for different entities. So we're very proud of her, and I have with me also Julie Brisson, Recreation and Facilities Manager, to help me recognize Barb tonight. Thank you. I'd like to share with you the award presentation that was written at CPRA and presented. During the course of Barb's career with Wheat Ridge Parks and Recreation, she has been instrumental in creating a culture of safety, including developing an emergency response plan, not just for the aquatics area, but the entire facility. She has always searched for new and better ways to operate the pools, whether it is related to chemicals used, mechanical operations, program, and especially training and mentoring young aquatic staff. Barb consistently exhibits dedication and responsibility to the profession. She believes that she has an ethical obligation to provide the city and her team with the best job she can, and that it is important to treat her team with fairness and consistency, which is accomplished by following policies, owning up to her mistakes, and learning from them. She has a strong commitment to be fiscally responsible with the funds that have been allocated for the aquatic section. She continuously looks for ways to reduce costs and prioritizes spending based on the needs of the community, safety, and how aquatics has been impacted by the minimum wage increases and new industry standards for lifeguard response times. She is constantly looking at ways to enhance the customer experience and has completed this by enhancing training for new lifeguards, managers, and seasoned staff. Barb works with a variety of staff that have diverse levels of knowledge and skills. She believes it is important to develop human capital, her words, and to mentor staff through work issues and oftentimes personal issues that impact a team member at work. She has been an asset to the department and the city of Wheat Ridge for over 18 years. And I would like to say that we hired Barb in 1999, right before the rec center was opened. And she has managed both indoor pools at the recreation center and the outdoor pool since that time. And she makes her job look easy, and it is not. So both Julie and I are thankful every day for the work that she does for us in managing these pools. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you and congratulations. Our next order of business is a citizen's right to speak on any item not on the agenda. And while the sign-up sheet is coming forward, when I call your name, if you would please go to the podium, adjust the microphone so we can hear you. Give us your first name and last name, and spell your last name and your address. Okay, so this is general items. Other than agenda items, okay. The first speaker I have signed up is Carol Matthews with John Butler on deck.
I'm Carol Matthews, Mathews, 3851 Hoyt, Ridge. Election time is here. The City Council passed a resolution calling for defeat of 74, which would protect property owners and business owners from damages caused by government actions. City Council put a measure on the ballot to keep surplus funds from 2E for city projects. Projects listed were Anderson Park, Wadsworth, and Clear Creek Crossing. Council is willing to raise $20 million to fund an enhancement of continuous lane traffic lanes on Wadsworth that marketing experts condemn because it would destroy business access from 35th Avenue to 44th Avenue and beyond. The URA has granted a $25 to $30 million TIF to the developers of Clear Creek Crossing, but when pressed, the administration and council claims there is no money for improvements to West 38th Avenue from Kipling to Youngsfield, or to enforce regulations and codes in Wheat Ridge. The city now sponsors a class at the rec center on how to establish B&Bs. City staff claims to be watching the growing number of Airbnbs in Wheat Ridge for several years. Section 26608 of City Codes states that opening an Airbnb in Wheat Ridge requires a special use permit. The building department claims that there is no code regarding Airbnbs in Wheat Ridge, claiming a difference between Airbnbs and regular B&Bs. City administration claims staffing issues as an excuse for not enforcing city codes or establishing regulations on rental abuse or other city violations. Wheat Ridge tax-paying citizens are no longer protected from the unknown or unwanted strangers in their neighborhoods, as their non-compliant neighbors open Airbnbs and rent to massive number of tenants. Our neighboring cities and unincorporated Jeffco charge for special use permits and license and regulate Airbnbs and rentals. There is a lodging tax in Wheat Ridge, which, with the help of the city staff, those people running Airbnbs do not pay. Our TIF dollars are helping to finance a new hotel in Clear Creek Crossing, while city staff encourage untaxed Airbnbs. Homeowners pay taxes, business owners pay sales and property taxes. Marijuana businesses pay sales tax. While undermining our neighborhoods and depreciating our home property values, Airbnbs do not pay taxes, nor do they are licensed or regulated. City administration refuses to enforce city codes. Council changes zoning and refuses to regulate rentals and other forces which endanger citizens. City staff pushes through issues which endangers home investments, business interests, and threatens the financial stability of our city and citizens. How can you ask Wheat Ridge citizens to give you more dollars and to vote against citizens' rights for compensation for losses sustained by governments when you will not protect our rights and interests.
Ms.
You ask us
Ms.
to give our
Matthews,
trust.
Your 3 minutes have expired. Thank you so much.
We need your confidence.
Thank you so
not
much.
the opposite.
Mr. Butler, if you'll forgive me, I grabbed your name off of the wrong list. You're speaking on a specific item, and I grabbed the wrong list. So if you'll wait, we'll get to you when that item comes up. So this is on items, anything other than agenda items, and Bob Brazel is first up with Chris Chidley on deck.
Bob Razzle, 3830 Carr Street. I hate to be repetition, but I'm up here also on this Airbnb thing. That there was a thing in the Wheat Ridge Rec Center about an Airbnb and all this, you know, and it was a class, not just for millennials, learn about different short-term rental options on Airbnbs, how they work, where your primary residence or rental property you own. Short-term rentals could be perfect for you. This class will cover many topics, including city and tax requirements there are and what the challenges and supporting business available, blah, 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 on and on and on. And, you know, I don't think it's right that the city should be basically endorsing this by having a class at the rec center when we have right in our codes an Airbnb. B&B doesn't stand for Beavis and Butthead. It stands for bed and breakfast. And right in our city code, section 26-123, it says bed and breakfast rooms, a subordinate use of one family dwelling which offers sleeping rooms for overnight transient occupancy, wherein there is no cooking facilities located within the sleeping rooms, where, however, meals may be prepared by the resident owners in the dwelling kitchen and taken in a common room. Bed and breakfast means rooms accessory to one family dwelling primary use. So that's the definition of an Airbnb. Just because you call it a different name doesn't mean it's a different thing. We've had bed and breakfasts forever, and this fits in our description. So we regulate bed and breakfasts in section 26-608, bed and breakfast rooms. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can read it. But the dwelling has to be occupied by the owner. A few high points. There has to be 12,500 square foot lot area for the first bed in a bed and breakfast. They have to have an additional 1,000 square feet of lot area for each additional room. Off-street parking, one additional space required, basically for bedroom. All building and fire and health and other applicable codes of law shall be met prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So they have to have that and a special use permit. I don't know why we can require hotels and motels to do all this and make them get licenses and tax them, have fire code inspections and everything else, but we're not going to require that of these other people. That's not fair. If people want to be in business, then they need to be in business and need to pay the taxes and the freight involved in it. And I think that the city needs to start enforcing the codes that we have right now. And maybe we need to enhance what the penalties for these are, as several other cities around our area have, including Denver and quite a few others, to basically discourage this. And if you're going to do it, then you're going to pay the price for being in business. If you're in business, you're in business. Thank you.
Thank you. My next speaker signed up is Chris Chidley.
I'm going to have a couple of the residents give their time to me so I can speak beyond 3 minutes.
Okay, which residents are going to give you time?
Gail Thompson.
One moment, please. Okay.
Walter Lamondoza? No.
Okay.
Michael
that-
Brendel?
So that's all you can have. So
That's okay.
You've got 9 minutes.
I press the forward key here, and you all see these images here. Okay. So my name is Chris Chidley, spelled C-H-R-I-S, and my last name Chidley, C-H-I-D-L-E-Y. What we'd like to talk to you about briefly this evening is streetscape of residential dwellings. I'm sorry? Oh, my address is 4020 Everett Street. Is that sufficient? So what we'd like to talk about this evening is streetscape of residential area and the character of what a neighborhood is. And we're going to use the example of what you see on the screen in front of you, which is a corner lot that is on 4055 Everett Street. There are a number of residents sitting here this evening that live around this area here. If you look at the picture that we have shown you here, there is a larger red outline. That's the actual lot that this house is sitting on. You can see a little brown roof in the center of the lot. That's the house that's currently there at the moment. The developer for this property wishes to split the lot into two. There's a smaller dash line that you can see closer towards the streets of Field Drive and Everett. The developer so far has actually managed to split this lot into two. This is what we call a slot lot. The house that you see remaining will become what's called a flag lot. Basically, it stands behind the house, and you'll see a little dash line on the top of the image here. I can't point to it. Anyway, you can see there's a horse-shaped driveway that comes in and out both sides. One of these driveways will remain to access the house. So the reason that we're here this evening is to talk about this area and streetscape. Streetscape to us is the actual setback of houses along a street. So the little red area that you saw previously, now you see it just as part of the neighborhood. The yellow lines that you see, these are basically the house setbacks along the surrounding streets. What the developer proposes to do is actually build a house in front of a house. This is just a general idea, again, of like what this street looks like. As you can see, like most of the houses are very well set back. It's a sidewalkless area, and the driveways and grass areas are very pushed back from the street. I'm going to get to the actual house itself. This is the house here. You can see the yellow door, there's a tree in front of it. This is what the developer proposes to do. They're going to split off the front, as we've said before, and create a house in front of a house. I've gone back to the original drawing here. You can see it more in pictorial form. We use this as an example because if you look at the surrounding houses, nobody has attempted to build a structure in front of an existing residence, and this is what the proposal will be. This is literally the gray house you see at the bottom is the existing house. The house that they propose to put in front of it is the darker one. The process for the building department is such that they've already received a division of a lot. They have not applied for a permit for this house, but they had to prove that they could fit a house onto here. We do find like the scale of it inappropriate, not because of like it's a house and its size, it's more where it's placed on the lot in the neighborhood. This is just an elevation of it here, and I might return to a couple of the other slides to talk about streetscape. So a comparable house to this size will be built, as you see here. Forgive me, I didn't put these together, so I have to go back. So I'm going to use this one mainly to do most of the talking with. If you can see, there's a house on the one side that says work on it. That's actually my house. It's set about 50 to 60 feet back from the actual street. If you look across the street, you see there's a gray house with a darker color to it. That's set 50 foot to 60 feet back. This is the general setup for our neighborhood. To try and keep Wheat Ridge in, shall we say, the appeal that I believe it has to it, that most houses are further apart from one another. They're on larger lots. Some of the reason that I moved out here was because of this. If we take this as an example that someone attempts to build a house in front of a house, and this becomes a norm to this area, shall we say, the urban fabric of what Wheat Ridge is will start to diminish a little bit. I'm going to go backwards to, and forgive me if I have to step through these. So this diagram here, this is the surrounding area. There are about 5 or 6 streets here. The red areas that you see that are noted, these are other possible lots that the same scenario could happen to. What our statement is here this evening is if it continues that houses are built in front of houses, lots are further divided and split up, then the character of what Wheat Ridge is, the streetscape of what Wheat Ridge is, will start to diminish. That's probably all the comments I have for this evening, but what we would like to leave you with, this is just the start of what the residents in this neighborhood would like to bring up. We're using this house as an example, but what we would like to do is come back in 2 weeks' time and further discuss what will happen to other lots like this. If we could get some kind of feedback from the building department that we've actually come today and discussed this with them, with you this evening, and then to continue this at a later date. So that's all we have for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker signed up is Genevieve Wooten.
Good evening. I'm here this evening to speak to the West Metro Fire 7C ballot issue. My name is Genevieve Wooden, W-O-O-D-E-N. I live at 9456 West 47th Avenue. As you know, a few years ago, the Wheat Ridge Fire Department was absorbed into the West Metro Fire Protection District. And right now, the Fire Protection District is facing a shortage. They are asking on the ballot coming up, the ballot issue 7C, for a stabilization of their funding. Over the last decade, the volume of emergency calls in the district has increased more than 50%. About 70% of those calls are for emergency medical services. And despite the increase in call volume, the district has not had a voter-approved funding measure in over 12 years. While the district has been doing more with less for the last decade, they are facing a crisis in funding. The district's primary source of funding is property tax. An amendment to the state constitution, known as the Gallagher Amendment, sets property tax valuations and assessment rates. Next year, the rate is expected to drop from its current rate of 7.2% to 6.1%, which would result in a funding loss of over $5 million. To get ahead of this challenge, the district is seeking voter support to stabilize the funding source at 7.1%. So this is not a tax increase, it is a tax stabilization. And again, this does not increase taxes, it sets it and freezes it. Without this measure, residents within Wheat Ridge may see a drop in response times to calls, and as we know, our fire department is so important for services to our city. And I'd like to respectfully ask that Council consider a resolution in support of 7C on the upcoming ballot measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker looks like Nancy Vandemonk. I hope I didn't mispronounce the name too badly.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Vandemark. I live at 4098 Field Drive, and I wanted to speak to the same issue that Chris Chitley just spoke to a minute ago. We're immediately adjacent to the property that's been subdivided. I know I've exchanged emails with a number of you here about this issue, and obviously we're concerned about our neighborhood and the impact, long-term impact of these kinds of subdivisions on our neighborhood. So we're both requesting, or I'm both requesting that we continue to look at this specific property to the extent possible, but also that we look at the other properties in the neighborhood that could be subdivided, and at a minimum change codes so that there is some sort of public noticing when there's a subdivision in our area. It seems to me that subdividing a property that's been in a neighborhood that's been well established in Wheat Ridge with no notice of citizens and no opportunity for public comment or public hearing is just basically wrong for the citizens of Wheat Ridge. And we'd like to work with staff and with you all on some sort of solution to this problem on the long term. And so that's all I have tonight, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Our next speaker looks like Michael Brendel. Pass? Thank you. Our next speaker then is Christine Jensen and Rachel Holteen on deck.
Good evening, mayors and members of City Council. I have a flyer that goes along with my presentation, a handout. May I hand it out to?
Please give that
Okay.
to the clerk and we'll...
There should be enough for council members as well as city staff. My name is Christine Jensen. I live at 7543 Lupin, L-U-P-I-N-E Court in Arvada. I was born and raised in Wheat Ridge, but Arvada is my home right now. I also am the manager of the Arvada branch of Fairway Independent Mortgage, and in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm also a candidate. I'm running for State Senate District 20, which includes all of Wheat Ridge. But it is my role as the manager of the Arvada branch of Fairway Independent Mortgage that brings me here today. In that role, I'm also a member of the Wheat Ridge Business Association. It's been my honor and privilege to be associated with the Wheat Ridge Business Association for quite some time now. And I come with an offer of a gift that we hope that the city of Wheat Ridge will accept from Fairway.
Yes.
Fairway has been involved with a charity called the Nancy Lieberman Charities for several years now, and I have a short statement. Fairway Independent Mortgage is giving back to the community by becoming a legacy partner of the Nancy Lieberman Charities. Founded by Basketball Hall of Famer Nancy Lieberman, the NLC, Nancy Lieberman Charities, strives to provide a healthy physical, emotional, and mental environment for young girls and boys to build their self-esteem and confidence through the sport of basketball. The nonprofit offers several programs, including nationwide Dream Courts initiative with the World Ventures Foundation to build basketball courts in underprivileged communities, summer basketball camps, clinics for children in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, led by Lieberman, and educational scholarship programs. I have a couple of other quotes that I can read in a few moments as well. But the Nancy Lieberman Charities provides a healthy physical, emotional, and mental environment for young girls and boys to build confidence and self-esteem so that they make positive choices for their future. Nancy Lieberman is dedicated to expanding and ensuring that sports and educational opportunities exist for youths through her basketball camps and clinics, Dream Courts, educational programs, and the newest of which is the Swish Court concept. Fairway would like to make an offer of a basketball court rehabilitation in the city of Wheat Ridge. They specifically picked out this community as the recipient of the generous offer that they are making. All we would like the city of Wheat Ridge to do is identify for us which court they would like rehabilitated, and Fairway will cover the entire cost of the rehabilitation. Not only giving an update to the court, but providing whatever might be needed for the area, such as a handicap accessible entrance or updated parking and that sort of thing. So I'd like to invite the City of Wheat Ridge to accept this gift that we'd like to offer and give us the opportunity and grant us the staff time that would be needed to identify the court and then proceed with the cost of the rehabilitation at our expense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will have our staff take a look at this and get back to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel Hulteen and Suzanne Teal on deck.
Good evening, Mayor Starker and council members. My name is Rachel Hulteen. I live at 4690 Balsam Street in Wheat Ridge. And I'm here tonight for a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank council members Dozeman and Pond for attending the last Pints and Policy. The topic was zoning. We called it Entering the Twilight Zoning. We also had great staff support from Planning Manager Lauren Mikulak. We packed the room with 40 people from the community who came out to learn more about zoning in Wheat Ridge. And it was a really fun night, and we just really appreciate the city's support of Pints and Policy. And I think it says a lot about our community that we have enough people out there that are interested in that topic. And just the high-level presentations from city staff and the council people really made the experience great for everybody, so thank you for that. The next one is on November 8th. It is at Long Shots at 7 p.m. The topic is Festivus, which, if you guys are familiar with that, is an airing of grievances. And we've picked that to help sort of cleanse our souls after the upcoming election cycle. So we hope everyone will come. These are both programs of Local Works, and they're just great ways for us to get civically engaged and figure out how to be better citizens. So thank you. And we hope to see you there. It'll be fun. And then the next thing I want to mention is that we are a couple of months into, as you guys are aware, the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Update. Myself and Sunny Benacourt are co-chairing it, and we have our third meeting this Wednesday. A huge part of the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Update is a series of conversations with different community members. We just wrapped up the first round of that, and we'll be initiating the second round in a couple of weeks. We really ask anyone who gets invited or sees an invitation to join one of these conversations. We really hope that they will attend, and you'll encourage people you know in the community to attend, because the more voices we hear from, the higher quality output we have in May for council to consider for adoption. So look for some invitations coming out. We're trying to hold the next round all in public places so everyone feels like they can come. We're looking at a variety of locations across the city, including looking at schools and the rec center. So I will be sure to send an email to you guys so you know those times and dates. But please, anyone who comes across an invitation, we hope you'll see there. And then just kind of ad hoc tonight, I'm adding just my reflections on Airbnb. I travel across the country and travel internationally, and I always first look at Airbnb as a place to stay. Because of Airbnb, I have become part of communities and cities that I visit that I wouldn't normally do if I were just staying in a hotel. I spend my dollars in communities that I would have never come across if I weren't staying in an Airbnb. I meet wonderful local people who help me appreciate local culture. And I think properly regulated, Airbnb is a great enhancement to our local economy and a great way to show off the best of what Wheat Ridge has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Suzanne Teal. Very good. Thank you so much. And our next speaker is Deb Johnson. We'll pass on Deb Johnson and Greg Johnson. Okay. Very good. That concludes all of the people that I had signed up to speak tonight. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak on any item not on the agenda? You may come forward now. Okay, we have none, so we will complete our citizens' right to speak and move to our first agenda item. Ms. Duran, would you please introduce item number 1?
Thank you, Mayor. Consent agenda Item A, a motion to appoint Michael Griffith to the Board of Adjustment, District 4 vacancy, term to expire March 2nd, 2021. Item B, Resolution 63-2018, approving a contract with the Colorado Department of Transportation for maintenance of traffic signals.
Thank you. Would you please provide a motion to that effect?
Yes, I will. Consent agenda item A, I move to appoint Michael Griffith to the Board of Adjustment, District 4 vacancy, term to expire March 2nd, 2021. Consent agenda item B, Resolution 63-2018, approving a contract with the Colorado Department of Transportation for maintenance of traffic signals.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Oh, you know what? I didn't turn it on. Okay, you can vote now. I'm sorry. Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. On item number 2, Ms. Davis, would you please introduce item number 2?
Thank you. Resolution number 66-2018, a resolution adopting the city budget and appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2019 budget year. And Patrick, I'm assuming you're going to go over a pretty thorough presentation.
Yep, if you want to bypass.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
And this is a public hearing, so I would like to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, you have a presentation for us.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will have a brief presentation this evening. We've had
Even better.
What's that?
Even better.
Even better. We had a pretty detailed, extensive discussion at the study session a couple weeks ago. But tonight is the official public hearing, which is required by city charter and state laws. So we will just go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, we had a study session a couple weeks ago and presented the full 2019 proposed budget to City Council. City Council did have a few budget amendments, which we have included in the budget for tonight. And the first one was additional $25,500 to the Wheat Ridge Environmental Sustainability Committee. Also, an additional $20,000 to the Carnation Festival Committee for a total of $100,000. An additional $45,000 to the Wheat Ridge Business District for their Facade Plus grant program for a total of $90,000. $40,000 to the Activate 38 program, and a decrease of local works fund budget of $60,000. So it was a net increase of the total budget of $70,500. I need to apologize. I forgot to add the $40,000 for the Activate 38 project in your council packet, but I've amended the resolution, which I'll have the city clerk. City clerk will pass that out. So essentially, the only change that that is different than your council packet is the CIP budget is increased by $40,000 for the Activate 38 program, and the general fund balance is decreased by $40,000 to fund that. So what you have in front of you is the updated resolution. So the 2019 proposed budget is just over $75 million. This includes all the different spending funds in the city's budget: the general fund, the capital improvement program, the 2E, and 8 special revenue funds. The general fund is the largest expenditure, 47%, and the 2E bond fund at 30%. CIP budget 14%, recreation center fund at 3%, open space at 5%, and miscellaneous other special funds at 1%. Focusing specifically on the general fund, which is our daily operating budget, we're proposing a revenues in 2019 of $35.6 million. And as you all know, and I think our public knows by this point, that sales and use tax is our largest revenue sources here in the city of Wheat Ridge. So over 70% of our revenues come from sales and use tax, and property tax is one of the lower ones. You see on the chart, 3% is all we get from property tax. A lot of miscellaneous revenue sources, which I can happy to answer questions about if you have any specific questions. I would like to point out, though, our interest revenue has increased quite substantially. Our current city treasurer, Jerry DiTullio, has been moving funds into higher interest accounts, and we're seeing, I think, a 300 to 400% increase in interest over the last couple of years, so that's a good thing. General fund expenditures, 35.6 million, so equal to what we're projecting in revenues. And the police department, public works, and parks and rec, three areas that you kind of associate with city government, are the majority of the budget. So about 70% go into those three areas of the city. Now moving on to our 2E fund. This is the fund that was set up to collect the revenues from the temporary sales tax increase that was passed in 2016 for the 2E projects. We're proposing a budget in 2019 of just over $22 million for these 4 different projects that the voters approved, and then also for the debt service on the bonds in 2019. Those 4 projects include the Clear Creek Crossing hook ramps off of I-70. It's about $5 million budgeted in 2019 to finish that project. And then the Wheat Ridge Ward G-Line Station in public improvements out in that area to help catalyze economic development and redevelopment of that site. We have $8 million, just over $8 million proposed for improvements in that area. The third project, the 2E project, is the Wadsworth Boulevard Widening Project. We have $3 million in the 2E fund for next year. We have more funding in the CIP budget, which I'll get to in a bit. And then Anderson Park, just about $2.5 million in the 2E budget to make renovations to Anderson Park. There's additional money also in Open Space and Conservation Trust Fund budgets. So now moving on to the 2019 proposed capital improvement program budget, or CIP. We're proposing expenditures of just over $10.5 million. A good chunk of that, majority of that is for the Wadsworth project, 64%, and then preventative street maintenance, our annual asphalt, slurry seal, chip seal, concrete replacement across the city. And then we have a few other miscellaneous projects, which we'll talk about here in a bit. The major projects that we're proposing for next year in the CIP budget is, again, 6.8 for the Wadsworth project, widening project, preventative street maintenance of 1.9 million. Bridge maintenance, this is the first year we've actually put allocated some funding for bridge maintenance. We have several bridges throughout the city. The first one that we are proposing to make some repairs to is the bridge at 44th Avenue, on 44th Avenue, adjacent to Anderson Park. We are budgeting just under $400,000 to make some improvements to that bridge. Some City Hall improvements, specifically security related throughout the city. City Hall building, just over $343,000 for some improvements to our City Hall building. Some drainage projects, specifically a project in conjunction with the City of Edgewater at 26th and Fenton, $300,000. Some additional work on the Clear Creek Crossing project, $136,000. $100,000 for public infrastructure related to private development. Sometimes we get private development projects that come into the city. There might be an adjacent sidewalk or some other public improvement that the city can put some money towards to make that project even better. Street striping maintenance. This is the first year we pulled this out of our general street preventative maintenance. We have more and more bike lanes throughout the city and other striping needs that we need a specific budget to make sure that we're keeping up on the striping for those areas. We have $100,000 in for an update of the master plan for a public works and parks operations facility. Right now we have 2 facilities for both of those departments that are really not up to par, not meeting our needs, so we'd like to look at some long-term plans for making some improvements to those operation facilities. We have $130,000 for bike and ped improvements that are recommended in the bike and pedestrian master plan, and then this also includes that $40,000 that City Council approved for specifically for the Activate 38 program. So now moving on to our open space fund, we're proposing a budget of just over $3.5 million. And the biggest project next year is the phase 2 of our Prospect Park improvements. And then renovation of Anderson Park of just over $912,000, and that's in conjunction with the funding from the 2E budget. Also, the Green, improvements to the Green, which is the property off of 38th Avenue in front of Stevens Elementary into a city plaza festival area. And then our Conservation Trust Fund budget, we are proposing a budget of just over $303,000. Funding, a little bit of funding going towards renovation of the Anderson building, $50,000. We have some funding set aside to make improvements to our Recreation Center fund, just over $100,000. A new playground at the Recreation Center for $100,000. And resurfacing of tennis courts at Panorama Park for $50,000. So those are the major funds, but there are some other budget strategic priorities that I have not mentioned that I'd like to highlight. We are providing our annual funding to the Urban Renewal Authority Board of $300,000 for them to work on urban renewal projects throughout the city. We have about $665,000 allocated for TIF agreements that the City Council has approved for several different developments across the city. So this is not an actual expense. The revenues, this is offset by the revenues at the same amount, so it's kind of a wash, but we still have to show this as an expenditure. Our annual funding to Local Works for 2019 is proposed at $490,500 for numerous efforts and projects. And as I mentioned before, the Wheat Ridge Business District Grant Program, and City Council approved a $45,000 increase to that for a total of $90,000. 44th Avenue is the commercial corridor that the Community Development Department has identified as a corridor that needs a planning effort for 2019. That could be a sub-area plan or some type of other planning effort to look at the future redevelopment of that corridor. That's $150,000 for that effort. Coronation Festival contribution, as I mentioned before, that's $100,000. We also pay staff overtime for that event. That's $25,500. City Council appointed a citizen review committee, which has evaluated requests from local nonprofit outside agencies, and they're recommending a total of $133,410 to numerous outside agencies, and those were listed in your budget book. And as you all know, our 50th anniversary is coming up here for the city of Wheat Ridge next year, and we are putting aside $60,000 to help celebrate that throughout the year. Staffing changes, we are proposing an increase of 9 FTEs in 2019. Most of those are to help us manage new programs and services that the city has been seeing. The police department positions are to respond to the increase in our commercial development, and the parks positions are to respond to the large increases in our open space and parks properties. And so for a total of 9 FTEs for 2019. And just some short-term fiscal notes and highlights I'd like to present. We are proposing or projecting a 5.4% increase in our revenues in 2019. A good chunk of that, almost a third of that, is coming from the Wheat Ridge Corners project at 38th and Wadsworth. As you all remember, the Walmart closed out at Applewood Shopping Center on July 7th of 2017. The Regency, the developer for that site, the owner of that shopping center, has plans to backfill that Walmart space with 4 new tenants, and they're proposing to do that over a 2-year period of 2019 and 2020. None of those revenues for those new tenants have been factored into the 2019 budget because we're not exactly sure when they're going to open, but we're estimating once those 4 tenants do open, it should generate anywhere between $800,000 and $900,000 in additional sales tax revenue annually. Also, the Clear Creek Crossing project is been approved and is under development. We will be receiving a reimbursement for the I-70 32nd Avenue environmental assessment work that the city paid for. We should get that money sometime in 2019. I didn't project those funds in the budget either because we haven't received those yet. I'm not exactly sure when we're going to. So if we get those in 2019, that'll be extra revenues. And then once the project is fully built out, we're estimating about $1.8 million a year in new revenues off of that site sometime in 2020 or 2021. And there's also several other miscellaneous development projects across the city in the Applewood Shopping Center, the Kipling Ridge project, West End 38. Those will be opening in phases throughout 2019 and 2020. Once none of these revenues are in the 2019 budget, but once those projects are up and running, we're estimating that those projects will be generating about additional $300,000 in revenues per year. You know, the one unknown, I think, that nobody really knows what's going to happen necessarily is the economy and when the next recession is coming. I think we hear things differently daily from different economists. So that's one unknown. You know, we're building out a lot of residential and commercial throughout the city, and if we do have a large recession in the next few years, that will have an impact on future revenues. We just can't predict that right now. The news that we've been hearing recently is that the recession is not anytime soon. Development is still strong, including residential and commercial. So that's something, though, that we need to be aware of for the next few years. And the 2019 budget that we propose has a healthy reserves to get us by if there are any, if the recession comes sooner than expected. So there was several opportunities for public input on the budget, including the Citizen Outside Agency Review Committee, as I mentioned. And we had two public input opportunities on July 10th and August 14th. We had one citizen on July 10th ask for additional pedestrian safety improvements on West 38th Avenue for the Activate 38 program, and City Council agreed to $40,000 for that project. And that is a very brief summary of the budget. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I think before we go to questions from staff, I'd like to go to public comment. I have one person signed up, Rachel Holteen, to speak on item number 2.
Thank you, Mayor Starker and Council, and Patrick Goff for yet another great budget presentation. I have a couple of things. First of all, I just really want to thank you for lending your ear and agreeing to support the Activate 38 improvements. We realize we've got some work ahead of us this year to really specifically identify what's the best improvement in the best location. And through local works investment in Activate 38, we will be working with the community on the corridor to connect them with the city so that those investments really benefit the community members. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to switch hats. I'm going to put on my AT-AT hat, or my cape, my t-shirt. I really want to thank you also for your continued support of general bicycle and pedestrian safety. That stuff doesn't happen without budgeting priorities. And I remember being in this room 4 or 5 years ago and making a passionate plea to get some funding back into the budget so that we could continue those investments. And I really appreciate that just happens automatically because we have significant investment that we need to do to connect within our community and to enhance our connections to things like the incoming commuter rail station. So thank you for continuing to prioritize those. And then lastly, I just want to say that, Wheat Ridge is not unique. We're changing as a community, and as we change, so must our budgeting priorities. And I appreciate that Wheat Ridge takes an approach that allows citizens to be informed, be engaged, and be heard. And I appreciate that we have a council that's willing to recognize that as we change, so much our funding. We have some things ahead of us. So I'm already going to make a request for next year. I realize we're talking about this year's budget, but I'm really aware how constrained we are spending money on arts in this city. And we have a city that is filled with talented artists of all types. And so I feel great about tonight's budget. I'm one of 31,000 people in this city, but I am already thinking about next year, and I'm really thinking about what more we can do with the arts if we fund that more robustly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the only person that I had signed up to speak. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak on this item? May come forward now. Okay, I will open the floor up to questions from council. Mr. Matthews.
What a surprise.
What a surprise.
I have one general comment first on the budget. During our study session, it was mentioned that maybe we should consider dropping the amount of reserve that we try and maintain in the city. I did a little research on that, and the closest I could come to us in our town in this area was in 2013, City of Colorado Springs. Contracted with Government Finance Officers Association to do a report on, I will grant you it's their particular situation, but what they should have maintained for reserves. And cliff notes on that is 12.5% for general fund revenues as budgetary uncertainty, and 12.5% of general fund revenues as an emergency reserve, for a total of 25% of their total budget. So before we think about going into the weeds, we might think, and they make the comment here that 16% is what GFOA considers as the bare minimum for budgetary reserves, so the 25 is kind of a middle of the road. Thank you for that. I have some questions also on the item that we're adding here for the Environmental Sustainability Committee. It says include an appropriation in the amount of $20,500 for the Wheat Ridge Environmental Committee Sustainability. I'd like to know who's going to administer that, when they're going to receive the funds, who's going to decide for what items. Are we going to have some benefits to cost ratio metrics when that money does get spent eventually, and reports on success after it's been spent? How are we going to track what's going on there?
Let me see if I can answer that for you. I've agreed to continue the Environmental Sustainability Committee, which was organized by my predecessor, Mayor Jay, for at least another year. We are going to meet later this week and come up with some projects that are demonstrate our efforts in sustainability. The money would be only spent and requested after a project had been reviewed by the committee and put forward. And I'm sorry I don't have the rest of your questions, but
When you say put forward, does that mean come back to council for review before it's authorized?
well, no, I think it would come back to council after
the
we
fact?
had some demonstrable successes in it. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there other questions on the budget from council? Then I'm going to close the public hearing. Ms. Davis, a motion is in order.
I move to approve resolution number 66-2018, a resolution adopting the city budget and appropriating sums of money to the various funds and spending agencies for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2019 budget year.
Second. Would you add as amended to your motion, since you were given an amended resolution?
Oh, as amended by the resolution provided to us by Mr. Goff.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Hoppy.
Yeah, I'm going to make this ask one more time in the form of an amendment. I'd like to ask an amendment to add up to $45,000 to the Park and Rec personnel budget for a part-time sustainability coordinator who would then be the manager of the Wheat Ridge Sustainability Committee.
I'd like to second that.
There's an amendment and a second. Is there discussion on the amendment? Mr. Matthews.
That's in addition to the 25 they already get? So we're asking to give them a lot of money without even having an idea what they're going to do yet. I don't agree with that. I didn't agree with it at study session, and I'll be quiet now.
Ms. Dozeman.
So there were 3 FTE staff members added for Parks and Rec Department, correct?
4, actually.
4, okay.
Yeah.
So I would like to say that if we are going to have that part-time sustainability coordinator added, that it be taken away from a Parks and Rec FTE.
Ms. Hoppy.
I think the Parks and Rec have demonstrated the need for those 4, and this would be a part-time employee, but yes, the $25,500 would basically be their budget, their working budget, so they would have a program manager, a program budget, and a volunteer committee that would be there doing the work, is how I see that.
Ms. Duran.
Plus, they would be answering to us, to our mayor, and they did provide us with, I think, a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 different levels of what they would like to do. And to me, it just doesn't make sense that we dedicated, or they dedicated a year to bring us suggestions on how we can improve as a city and as a community, and then we're not willing to invest in somebody part-time that can implement some of these programs that they want to implement. I mean, this is happening around us in our communities, in Arvada, in Lakewood, in Golden, and we need to be forward-thinking and be willing to put in a little bit to get a lot out.
Ms. Dozeman.
So I think granting them the $25,500 as opposed to the $18,000 ask that they were requesting is a part of that investment. And I would rather see a return on investment as far as some of the demonstrable initiatives that we're going to be putting into place before we hire a part-time employee. I mean, we have the glass recycling, receptacles, within a couple places in Wheat Ridge, and the presentation that they gave us, the use was going down as opposed to going up, and I would really like to see what this volunteer board can do with the $25,500 granted to them, as opposed to jumping on hiring a part-time employee right now.
Ms. Davis.
I appreciate the idea, and I think the volunteer board did a lot, and the report they did was a lot. And their tiers, there's a lot that can be done. And I think that there's a lot that a part-time FTE could manage. But I just think that at this point, that part-time FTE doesn't have the funds to maybe manage a lot of those initiatives. So I think that we've kind of hamstringed a part-time FTE to manage $25,000 in, could possibly be one initiative, and then what do they do for the rest of the year? I mean, I guess if they're a grant writer or something, they can ask for grants and that type of thing. But it was my understanding that before we even created that FTE, that we were going to have Ms. Manwaring or somebody come back with what that plan would be, what that position would look like, what that job description would look like, because I just think that a part-time FTE to do this function with a $25,000 budget is just, I think it's kind of armchair quarterback. So I just think that unless our staff comes up with a plan of what that FTE should look like, what they need, I think it's hard for us to put that FTE in a budget without us really knowing what all is needed.
Thank you, Mr. Pond.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to talk about this again. We did talk about it at the study session. And I actually appreciate both sides. I think there's good counterpoints risen to this. I will vote for this amendment, as I did the consensus previously. And I'll just make a couple of comments. I think it is fair to ask for a description of the position and the duties, and to get that not only from our staff, but from the committee under the mayor, and to advance that back through us. And I don't believe that this amendment, by voting for this, precludes that from happening, and I would still expect that. This is, in fact, one of the recommendations from the committee, and so, in fact, I think it's an effort to continue to talk about this and continue to take seriously the integration of these things into our community, into our business. Obviously, if we cannot get to this point, I think we've done a good job in engaging the committee, and the mayor extending the committee, and us funding some of the priorities that they had put forward, and I look forward to moving forward into next year. But like I said, I will support this. Again, I think it was one of the primary recommendations of the committee as to how to create a program that would be able to, no pun intended, but be sustainable and advance this in our community.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
I will vote no for this. I support the overall sustainability effort, and people I realize that the committee did ask for somebody, but saying that other cities around us have a full-time person really doesn't compare apples to apples. We're smaller than Arvada, we're smaller than Lakewood, our budgets are smaller. And I would rather just see this evolve to see if we have success before we hire somebody. So if we have success, I think we should revisit this next year.
Ms. Hoppe.
I guess the way I see it is that we have an engaged committee currently, and what they can get done as volunteers could be expanded tenfold if they have a direct and specific manager, someone who has training and has worked in this position in other places. And it is on the list for staffing for 2020, but I feel like waiting until 2020 is just kind of dragging stuff down the road instead of actually getting it going and getting the ground running. Sustainability coordinators is not a new idea. It is successful in other places, and just because we don't have a sustainability coordinator doesn't mean we're inventing the wheel, because it's out there, the wheel's been invented. And I could see the committee being really imperative piece of hiring a coordinator and utilizing all of their expertise that they already volunteered to do for free. And so again, I think it's very important, and I would like to see it happen in 2019, not 2020 or 2021.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Dozman? Oh, Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting no on this amendment, simply because I think that the committee itself has more work to do as it relates to defining what we can get done in this current year, and then from there we can look at adding an FTE. But let's not forget that out of the $25,000 that's being allocated under the budget, 4,000 of that is going to creating logos and branding for this committee. Another 4,000 is going to postcards to educate citizens about environmental sustainability. So those are concerning enough for me, and then adding on an FTE without any clear defined goals and tasks would be doubly concerning, so I will not be voting for this.
Additional discussion? Ms. Duran.
Thank you. Our sustainability committee, they're part-time. They have jobs, they have lives of their own, and they did a great job bringing to us a tier 1 of what we could start with, and we need someone to help implement that. The fact that we're smaller than our surrounding cities doesn't mean that it's any less important to us. Having somebody part-time, we can have the committee and staff put together a job description, if that makes you more comfortable, to kind of see what they would be doing, what they would be implementing. I just hate to just say, no, absolutely not. I'd like to see us move forward. So however we could compromise at getting that done and you feeling comfortable with the job description, and finding somebody to really kind of move us forward. Stuff was taken off that list because there was no one to implement this. There was no one to move this forward, that's why. So I would like that to be considered. I think it's really important, something we really need, whether you believe in it or not isn't the point. The point is we need to move forward, so how can we do that?
Thank you. Further discussion on the amendment, Ms. Davis?
So I just want to follow up on some comments that were made. I don't think there's a thought of if we believe in it or not. I think that there's a lot of us who that do believe in this that are going to be voting no for this part-time FTE. I think we have suggested a compromise, which was there's already 4 FTEs that we're giving for Parks and Rec, and if Ms. Manwaring would like to reevaluate those and have half of that be this sustainability coordinator, then I think all of us were fine at keeping that at that 4. So if that's a choice Ms. Manwaring wants to make later, that's a choice that she can make. So I don't think we have said no, but we have said we've already given Parks and Rec 4 FTEs. That, you know, for our city, 4 FTEs in one department is big. So I think we did kind of bring up some compromise in a way that this could happen. I also think that, you know, when we talk about, especially a lot of us who are in areas that are, you know, special, you know your regulations and requirements, that I think that you're going to have an expert, and I think that's the other hard thing, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be hard to find a part-time expert sustainability coordinator. I don't know, maybe they're out there, but I think these people that are experts are probably full-time sustainability coordinator type people if they're experts. So I don't think that there was some discussion as far as, hey, is there a way we could do it this way? And I do think that a lot of us do support it, but I think a lot of us are being mindful of the budget. And again, like Mr. Fitzgerald had said, I think this is a step in the right direction with the movement towards the FTE next year as Ms. Manwaring had budgeted for.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Ms. Duran?
Maybe there's somebody on the sustainability committee right now that would be willing to take that position. We won't know. I just know that they're feeling a little deflated right now. We may lose some of those great people that were on there, so just keep that in mind. I mean, I'm going to be voting for this, obviously, so I just hope in the future that you really will next year when they come back around and they have ideas and suggestions and they want someone to facilitate this, that you will then say, you know what, yes, we'll do it.
Thank you. All right, we are going to vote on the amendment. Will the clerk please poll the council?
The motion fails 3-5 with council members Matthews, Dozeman, Davis, Fitzgerald, and Urban voting no.
Thank you. I believe we are at the main motion, which is the budget as
amended to include $40,000 for the Activate 38 program.
Thank you. So we will have any further discussion on the main motion. All right. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. So, Mr. Goff, you have a budget for next year? Thank you. It's a pleasure. Okay, we will move to item number 3, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Okay, Council Bill number 26-2018, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning hours of operation for medical marijuana centers and retail marijuana stores. This is a public hearing and an ordinance for second reading.
Madam Clerk, do I have a ordinance number?
You do. This will be ordinance number 1655.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. I am going to open the public hearing. And do we have a staff presentation?
We do. Mr. Dahl will give a brief presentation.
Thank you. The materials in your packet are really pretty self-explanatory for this. It's an hours change. As you'll notice, we do have hours for retail marijuana establishments. We don't happen to have hours. Our code's silent on medical marijuana, so to begin with, we certainly need hours for those operations. But the change would impose hours for medical marijuana and then extend both to 10 p.m. rather than the closing time, I think, of 8 p.m. presently. 7 p.m., sorry. 8 a.m., 7 p.m. is the present hours, and the request is that it be extended to 10 p.m. In any event, I would recommend that we certainly need to have hours for medical. I think that's an oversight. But your main job, of course, would be determining whether you want a closing time to be 10 p.m. or 8 p.m.
Thank you.
7 p.m.
7
sorry.
p.m.
Keep saying that.
Okay. Thank you for outlining the issues. I want to go now to our public comment on this, and I'm going to start with Mr. John Butler. My apologies again, Mr. Butler, for calling you previous to this.
Apology accepted, Mayor. My name is John Butler. I reside at 11576 West 38th Place here in Wheat Ridge for the past 4 years. So tonight I just want to speak briefly on this topic. Recently, the city treasurer released a number of dollars that were collected by the marijuana tax. And as a CPA, I know that expenses follow income. So, to get a real good handle on this thing, we really need to know what the expenses are. Not just expenses to Wheat Ridge directly in the form of police officers or whatever, extra overtime, any of those items, but the expenses are hard to find because they're spread over a wide spectrum of both public and private services, hospitals, schools, individuals bearing medical expenses that are related to this. So this will be a difficult number to come up with, I'm sure, but I think that it would be an important number to take a stab at least see what's the cost benefit of selling marijuana in the city. And if you happen to miss the article in the Denver Post a week ago Sunday, written by the U.S. District Attorney of Colorado, Bob Troyer, I thought it was very interesting. And he had many of the same points to make. I know that in the past Sunday Post, there were 2 letters agreeing with him and 2 letters disagreeing with him. So at least it was a balanced approach. And it's very hard to get a handle on the exact statistics because they're taken over different groups, different times, different ways, different places. So it is a very difficult subject to define, but it needs to be looked at because, at least in my opinion, it's a harmful program to be selling recreational marijuana to our citizens. It's not healthy. They can't get jobs driving trucks. The city of Denver, at least, is short 10 or 15,000 construction workers. I've heard of college students getting jobs and failing the drug test and not getting the job. Can you imagine that call to dad? I just can't imagine that call to dad. I would hate to hear that. So I'm against increasing the number of hours until we have a better handle on what the costs are that are going on. And, does it do our community any good to sell marijuana for a longer period of time? Obviously, it'll increase somebody's revenue or they wouldn't be interested in doing it. And in turn, would increase our revenue. But on the other hand, it will also increase our expenses. Until we have a good handle on expenses, I'm against increasing the selling hours. I think they do need to define the hours they can sell medical marijuana because it's probably just for regulation purposes. Keep that uniform. But I think that before we jump out and expand the program, we need to know where the program's been going. Thank you very much.
Pardon me, thank you. Our next speaker is Barbara St. John and Tyler Calvo. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. On deck.
Barbara St. John, 3480 Everett Street, Wheat Ridge. I urge you to vote against extending the marijuana shop hours. Why encourage more people from Wheat Ridge and elsewhere to go out into the night and then drive home, possibly under drug influence? That is asking for unneeded and unwanted trouble. This is way beyond regular business hours and could encourage fights, robberies, and traffic accidents. What example does this send to our youth that will make it even easier to obtain drugs? 7 p.m. is plenty late for anyone who wants this drug. Wheat Ridge is better off with less access to marijuana. Also, these extended hours are not the image of Wheat Ridge that we are striving for. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tyler Calvo and Roger Morin on deck.
I'm Tyler Calvo, CALVO, 9085 West 44th Avenue in Wheat Ridge. I am the General Manager and Vice President of Options Medical Center. Like many other businesses in Wheat Ridge, we are... Oh, no. I live in 627 Walden Circle in Boulder. Like many other businesses in Wheat Ridge, we are a small family-owned business. We care about the community and being a good actor in our industry because we believe in what we are doing, and we believe that we and the other businesses in Wheat Ridge have done a great job over the past 4 years to show everyone that we do belong here. I'm asking for you all to approve letting our businesses stay open for another 3 hours because doing so is something that I believe would benefit everybody. Like many people who would oppose this issue, I too once thought that our industry's consumers had been conditioned to know what our hours of operation were and that extending hours wasn't necessary. However, as a member of the marijuana industry group, I watched as its Denver members lobbied the city council there for late hours and was shocked that when after the issue passed, everybody started reporting increased revenues of 20 to 40% across the board. And Denver only extended its hours to 10 p.m. just like we're asking for. By extending hours to 10 p.m., all that is changing is businesses in Wheat Ridge are being given 3 additional hours to operate. Our rules, regulations, and punishments for breaking those rules and regulations still remain the same. To suggest that extending hours would lead to increased teenage use in dispensaries selling to kids and deciding to stop being compliant just because is nonsensical and reminiscent of the same hysteria that people tried to spread back in 2014 and 15 when recreational first opened. When Chief Brennan gave his annual report on crime a few months ago in Wheat Ridge, one of the stats that stood the most out to me was that when recreational marijuana opened up in Wheat Ridge that year, or the year after rather, the number of kids who were being caught in high school with marijuana dropped, I want to say it was something like in half. And ever since then, those numbers have stayed flat. I don't see any reason why that would change by giving us 3 additional hours to operate. Edgewater, Mountain View, and Glendale are all open until midnight. Denver, Boulder, and many other municipalities are now open until 10 p.m. Wheat Ridge is one of the last places that hasn't extended their hours, and the fact of the matter is that when our shops close early, Wheat Ridge citizens who are unable to make it into our stores during our current hours either have to look to the black market or take their money to other dispensaries outside of Wheat Ridge. So with my store personally, one of our closest operators that's outside of Wheat Ridge, down 44th Street, is Oasis. If you drive past them during the day, there's no one there. If you drive past them after we close, they're busy. I feel like that by extending the hours, we'll make it so that a lot of that money will again stop flowing outside of Wheat Ridge and stay in the city. Most people assume that owning a dispensary is the same thing as printing money, but that also couldn't be further from the truth. Our industry is the highest tax industry out there and the only industry in the country that can't deduct cost of goods sold from their taxes. We have incredibly high startup costs, pay higher rent, utilities, and for the past several years, due to overproduction and market saturation, there has been downward pressure on prices, which has been squeezing everybody's margins. The truth is out there is that a lot of businesses are struggling, if not outright losing money. One of the largest chains in the state that owns 21 dispensaries, you would assume that they're making a ton of money, but they're not. They're actually losing it. They're in the process of selling some of their stores right now because they need the cash flow. And they just made all their all of their employees company-wide take $1 an hour pay cut too. Based off of last year's recreational tax numbers in Wheat Ridge, we project that the city could see somewhere between $120,000 to $240,000 of increased revenue from our industry if we were to assume the same sales tax increase of 20 to 40% that Denver saw when they extended their hours. That's a lot of money that I feel like the city could put to good use. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Roger Morin and Jason Saunders on deck.
My name is Roger Morin, and I live at 3550 Miller Court here in Wheat Ridge. I recommend this bill be postponed indefinitely for reasons I'll call the slippery slope ethics, keeping up with the Joneses and Wheat Ridge's own raison d'etre, which has reason to exist. There's overlap among the three. First, slippery slope, a bill for pushing back closing times for marijuana facilities by 3 hours, simply because Denver and Edgewater have at least the same as an example of causal slippery slope. If Denver changes to midnight or all night, logical consistency says we do the same. To the hypothetical Wheat Ridge citizen wanting meds or rec after 7 p.m., one can always find an example of some person eating something at some hour a Wheat Ridge business might be closed. I use the King Soopers Pharmacy, and it closes at 9. There's no travesty here. People know to get their meds or wait next day. With a slippery slope dilemma, an elected official has a moral obligation to state where he or she ultimately stands and to communicate the city's values and principles so the city does not find itself in an undesirable situation or with an unintended consequence. Now, keeping up with the Joneses, again, we're having this discussion because of Edgewater and Denver closing times. What's omitted is broader analysis of Wheat Ridge's marijuana market. It's clear from a look at the Jeffco map and testimony from non-Wheat Ridge citizens on previous marijuana bills that Wheat Ridge has a tremendous advantage, actually advantages, of both proximity and traffic corridors to Golden, Arvada, Lakewood, Evergreen, and possibly other marijuana clientele. I don't think the city taxes marijuana. I presume to help our facilities remain competitive. It's incomplete and possibly misleading to just speak about closing times. I presented to council before that our code allows for the cultivation of and sale of marijuana far beyond just the needs of our citizens, that carries ethical responsibilities to our neighbors who've prohibited its sale for how and when we allow its sale. Finally, I personally see this council discussion on marijuana as a touchstone for how council sees the purpose of our city, our reason for being. Do we really want to simply compare ourselves to Edgewater and Denver? Do they define who we are? Of course not. Late night sales is not some best practice. It's a market niche to impulse users. Are we so dollar conscious that losing this revenue? That would suggest to me that we see ourselves as a city of convenience. I would hope that we strive for something much loftier. Council, again, I recommend you motion to postpone, but rather if you support this bill, please explain how extending marijuana facility hours defines our city and makes our city better. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Saunders and Lisa Johnson on deck.
Good evening. My name is Jason Saunders, S-A-U-N-D-E-R-S. I am co-owner of Bedore Claude LLC, doing business as Chronic Therapy at 10030 West 27th Avenue. My address is 6779 West Arkansas Avenue in Lakewood. I think Tyler said it all. I just wanted to say that we have noticed a drop in some of our business. Our customers are going other places. It just seems only fair to me. We brought this up, the whole marijuana argument, as regulate like alcohol. We're not even asking for that. We're just asking to have a competitive, to be able to be competitive with our neighbors and keep the money in Wheat Ridge. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Johnson, 2585 Salisbury Street. I am affiliated with Mr. Sanders. I hold the note. Me and my partners own the building that he is in right now, and I totally support this. I think for him to be competitive, he needs to be able to expend his hours a little bit, and in all actuality, it's all for the clients. It's for the clients. These are the people that need this. My husband has a chronic disease, inflammatory disease, in which he is a client at Chronic Therapy, and I think it would only be beneficial if he was able to purchase what he needs when he needs it, and 10 o'clock is really not all that hard. Jason brought up the fact of liquor stores being able to stay open as late as they do, and I think that for him to expand his hours would make him more competitive for himself, but the bottom line is the clients. Those are the people that really deserve to have this open. Not all people will work 9 to 5. So just expanding their hours, I think, would help them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's all of the individuals that I have signed up to speak tonight. Is there anyone here who has not signed up who would like to speak on this issue? Okay, seeing none, I will open this questioning now from council. I don't see any questions. Mr. Fitzgerald, would you provide us a motion? Yes, sir. Oh, Mr. I'll wait till the motion. Oh, okay. Mr. Fitzgerald.
I move to approve Council Bill number 26-2018. You have a...
Before you do that, I'd like to close the public hearing now. A motion is in order.
Council Bill 26-2018, an ordinance amending the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning hours of operation for medical marijuana centers and retail marijuana stores on second reading, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
Pardon me, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Matthews.
I'm going to be voting no on this motion. I understand that Colorado tried to make this a legal enterprise, and there's some conflict there with federal law. But to my way of thinking, we've sold our soul for $700,000. We know what the cost of our soul is worth in this city. That's when we started becoming drug dealers, by allowing it in the city. I just wish we had never done that, and I would entertain motions someday to kind of reverse that course. But for right now, I just see no benefits to our citizens for increasing what's already a bad mistake.
Additional discussion? Ms. Dozman.
So one of the speakers asked for those of us who support this initiative to speak as to why. I have long been confused as to why we do not regulate the marijuana industry as we do the alcohol industry or even cigarettes. I think that if we were to extend these hours, we will keep the business in Wheat Ridge. We will increase our tax revenues, which we've already stated that sales tax is our main source of revenue in the city, and I think that that will help recoup some of the loss that we encountered with the closing of Walmart before the Clear Creek Crossing project is able to come forth and start to kind of subsidize that loss. I also feel and know a lot of people that use medicinal marijuana or cannabinoids for themselves or their pets to ease anxiety, depression, chronic illnesses. And I believe that in states' rights, I think a lot of the initiatives that our country has founded and become federally legal have started with states' rights. And I will support this initiative, and I hope others will too.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
I just want to also make a comment as far as my thoughts on this issue. I think it's difficult because I think we are limiting hours on a business, and it's a business that is highly controversial. However, I think it's a business that has proven themselves when it comes to as far as their regulatory requirements, the safety requirements. I think we've had several reports from our police chief that they don't have any higher type of crime rate or police calls than, say, for instance, a 7-Eleven or, a convenience store. And I think I appreciate the comments tonight, and it's easy to go to, okay, anybody at after 7 o'clock is going to go and automatically buy this and drive under the influence, but then does that mean we need to be closing liquor stores at 7 o'clock as well? Because it's the same thing, and we're not closing liquor stores at 7 o'clock. So again, I have to support our businesses that we've allowed to be in our city. I do feel that from a police standpoint that we do have a handle on it, and from a regulatory standpoint, they have a handle on it too.
Thank you. Mr. Pond?
Thank you for everyone who spoke, especially Mr. Moran, who I will acknowledge as someone who has been active in this space for many years. I just want to acknowledge that, and appreciate the question. So, how does it define our city? I don't believe that it defines our city per se. I don't think it elevates it to that level. However, I will say that I think the activation in this topic and the fact that you have been, for instance, involved in this for many years and coming in and requiring us to, or asking us to answer that, is in fact a defining part of this industry and this regulation in our city. And so in a way, I think that answers the question for me. There's been through this debate a framework that's developed of expectation, of responsibility, and a dialogue that has occurred throughout it. I believe, obviously, that there's good things happening on both sides of that. I also believe that as we went through this and have gone through this over several years, there has been a clear message from the constituents, from this council, that there was a high level of expectations as to how to operate and what was tolerant and what we would tolerate and what we wouldn't tolerate. It just so happens that these businesses in this industry have honored those expectations. And as we have gotten annual reports that were requested as part of this previous discussion, we have continued to see that, in fact, these businesses have lived up to their side of the bargain. That does not mean that everyone agrees with the industry and some of the fundamental policies that were put down through the state legislation, and we've heard that. We've heard that on this council tonight. We've heard this on this council previously. But I will say, again, what defines us is the fact that we are continually diligent about talking about this, considering it with its levity, and I will bring up even something that that Mr. Matthews said in his comments that I think is important. We can and we will continue to come back and look at this. he has the ability, or anyone has the ability to make a motion and to have a discussion if it's taken up by this council, and for us to consider it and reconsider it, including reconsidering this extension of hours. So I would say that if we continue to move down the way we have, and I will support this tonight, that there will be, again, an expectation, a high level of expectation about how to conduct business, what it means to do that in our community, how serious that is, the levity of that, and the fact that if the expectations aren't met, that we will be up here considering a reversal of the extended hours or any other things that we've adopted by ordinance on this body. So I do think that's one thing to give you my long-winded answer on what defines us. But this process and this dialogue and these expectations have certainly defined us, and I don't think in a negative way.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that some of the folks who got up to speak mentioned that Denver, in many ways, was the impetus of this change, and this isn't the first time that Denver has created waves through our community, and I think it's important to understand as we look at Edgewater, Mountain View, Lakeside, and the such, those are what are historically called vice cities, and those were created by changing of different ordinances and whatnot within Denver, which caused those cities to be generated. And so, as we look at this issue and talking about the fact that, what does this say about our city? In many ways, I think that this speaks to our ability to be good neighbors with those dispensaries that are in our community because of the fact that they have operated safely and securely over the number of years that they've been in our community, that by granting this increase in hours, I think is appropriate given the way that they have operated heretofore. Now, if we were up here and we had seen an increase in crime and additional cost to the city, and the same entities were coming to us and asking to grant this additional 3-hour time, I would have much more consternation about this vote. But I think as it relates to being a good neighbor, part of that means understanding that there are folks in our community that do things that you may not enjoy or like or partake in, but that does not mean that that they should be prohibited from doing so. It just means that they need to be doing it in a professional, responsible manner. And from everything the chief of police has said, and the information that I've received as well, is that these dispensaries have operated in a safe and secure manner, and moving to 10 p.m. is still 2 hours earlier than any liquor store. And so I think that as an increase, it isn't that large of an increase, and so I'll be voting in favor of this.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 7-1 with Councilmember Matthews voting no.
Thank you. We will move to item number 4. Ms. Dozeman, would you please introduce item number 4?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 62-2018, a resolution approving an 11-lot subdivision plat for property zone mixed-use neighborhood at 10590 West 44th Avenue, case number WS-17-03 / Clear Creek Townhomes.
Thank you. This is a public hearing on a resolution. It is a quasi-judicial. I would like to open the public hearing. If you intend to speak on this item, will you please stand, raise your hand, and take an oath on this? Do you promise to tell the truth in this matter as you understand it?
I do.
Be seated. And Ms. Reckert, do we have a presentation this evening?
We do.
A brief presentation this evening.
Do my best.
Thank you so much.
So, for the record, Meredith Reckert, Wheat Ridge Community Development Department, and I'm here to present case number WS-17-03. This is an application for a subdivision plat on property located at 10590 West 44th Avenue. It is zone mixed use, and the purpose of the application is to subdivide the lot in preparation for construction
of 11 townhomes. Because the plat exceeds 5 parcels, it's being processed as a major subdivision. So Planning Commission did give a recommendation in this case. However, City Council is the final authority. And I would note that a neighborhood meeting is not required for a subdivision plat. So I'd like to enter into the record the case file and packet materials, or zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, and the contents of this digital presentation. This property is within the city of Wheat Ridge, and all notification and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, council has jurisdiction to hear this case. So this is a 2017 aerial of the property. It is located at the southeast corner of 44th Avenue and Moore Street. You can see that it's outlined in red. It is just a little bit under 0.6 of an acre in size, is regular in shape, is flat, and is vacant. The parcel was originally platted in 1953 as the J. Larry subdivision. Between 1999 and 2001, it was used as a temporary sales of bedding plants and produce. In 2002, there was a zone change from Ag 1 to Planned Commercial Development, again to legitimize that bedding plant sales facility into a more more permanent construction. However, it was never built. And then in 2015, City Council approved a zone change from the PCD to mixed-use neighborhood pursuant to case number WZ15-04. I would note that we do have a site development plan that is undergoing administrative review by staff. This is a copy of the zoning map. Again, you can see the property outlined in red, located at the southeast corner of 44th and Moore. There's a variety of land uses and zonings around it, including planned residential development on the east, R3 to the south and east, R2 and A1 on the north, PCD and C1 on the north side of 44th further to the east, and those surrounding land uses correspond with the zoning and include a mix of residential, quasi-public, commercial, and agricultural uses. So let's take a look at some slides of the property. This is looking south on Moore Street. The property under question is on the left-hand side of the image, where you can see the 6-foot high chain link fence. And again, this is looking southeast across the property. In the rear, the tan buildings are the Newgate Apartments, which is one of our bigger apartment complexes in the city. Looking north east, 44th Avenue, you can see up at this location. I'm standing on Moore Street as I was taking this picture. Looking east along 44th, there's existing 5-foot wide attached sidewalk and curb and gutter. Now I'm standing on the north side of 44th looking south. Again, we can see the Newgate Apartments over in this area. The adjacent land use to the south is a 6-plex. And again, another shot of that looking straight across 44th at the site. So whenever we talk about subdivisions, we'd like to just remind folks about what we are doing. The reason that we approve subdivision plats is to reconfigure lots, tracts, or parcels for sale or development. It removes, creates, and defines property lines. It allows the city to evaluate adjacent right-of-way, and also allows us to evaluate civil documents such as traffic studies and drainage reports. It does not change the zoning, it does not change the permitted uses, and it doesn't look at site design or building placement. So having said that, we are looking at a 2-sheet plan set that was included onto the Planning Commission staff report. Sheet 1 is what I like to call the declaration page. and it contains the legal description, the required signature blocks, a recording block for the Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder. There are notes that have been included pertaining to the vacation of previous easements, a restriction that limits development on the site only to townhomes, and a note regarding the primary detention tract. Page 2, or sheet 2, is really the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about tonight. It does illustrate how the new townhouse configuration will be constructed. Just to give you a little bit of orientation, we've got 44th Avenue up at the top, which is the north, Moore Street down here on the side. The proposed development depicts 2 rows of townhouses in this location. So a row of 5 across the north and a row of 6 across the south, with a common drive that comes in from Moore Street, which accesses rear-loaded garages. Each of the townhouses will be on their own lot and obviously available for purchase, so a purchase product. There are 2 tracts created by this subdivision. Each have their own purpose. I'm going to do this a little backwards and talk first about Tract B. This is a little closer view of the subdivision. Tract B is the area that will contain the private drive. So you can see Moore Street's over here. The drive will come in and then access each of these lots from the rear. It will also provide dumpster access as well, and it's been also reserved for drainage and utilities. Tract A is at the very northwest corner of the site, and it contains the area for the underground detention pond and an open space amenity on the northwest corner of the development. The southern portion of the tract will be paved and have benches and be an amenity for the homeowners, and the northern half will have irrigated turf and landscaping. It is an underground detention facility, so that leaves the top available for use by the residents, which is kind of a cool way to do it, I think. We also have additional accommodations for drainage, utilities, landscaping, and pedestrian access as designated by this blue area that runs across the northern portion of the subdivision and then turns around down the corner of Lot 5. We have a similar easement located down on the south side adjacent to those southern lots. And both of these areas will accommodate drainage, utilities, landscape, and pedestrian access. And while these improvements will be on private property, there will be a homeowners association that will be in place to maintain them, and staff has included a condition so that staff can review those HOA covenants prior to plat recording. Whenever we talk about a new subdivision, we can't go very far without talking about street construction. So in this particular slide, again, we've got some more easements designated in yellow that run along both the north side and the south side, as well as the east side. And those are available for drainage and utilities. This little red line down here represents a right-of-way dedication of 1.5 feet for Moore Street. Currently, 44th Avenue, as you saw in one of the previous slides, has existing 5-foot wide attached walk with curb and gutter. Those improvements will stay in place, and instead, the applicant will pay fees in lieu of constructing upgrades to those. Moore Street is currently does not have any public improvements along it, and the applicant will be required to build curb gutter and attached sidewalk. A subdivision improvement agreement will memorialize the developer's obligation for these improvements. And one other note is that there will be parallel parking allowed along Moore Street. So whenever we have vacant land that gets developed, again, the construction has to follow historic drainage patterns. They must be preserved, and the flow entering and release from the site must be maintained. Currently, the developed flows which, remember, this is the drainage tract up here at the northwest corner. So the developed flows are captured by yard inlets throughout the development that then convey the water up to this underground detention area. There are also inlets in this main drive aisle, which convey the water over here as well, which is eventually released underground into the 44th Avenue storm sewer. As far as parkland dedication, again, that anytime we talk about a residential subdivision, we have the ability to do an assessment for impacts on the parks. Typically, the lots in the city of Wheat Ridge are too small to merit a new park, so we get fees in lieu of land dedication. In this case, with 11 units, that comes out to about $27,000 that will go towards parks. And this fee will be required at the time of plat recording. So we, whenever we get a case like this in, we do send it out on a 15-day referral. All of the responding agencies have indicated that they can serve the property with improvements installed by the developer. Planning Commission reviewed this at a public hearing held on September 20th. They gave a recommendation of approval with 4 conditions that are attached. Those conditions are identical to those included in your recommended motions from staff. And ultimately, we are giving a recommendation of approval. Again, we've attached the 4 conditions related to the previous right-of-way dedication being called out, subdivision improvement agreement being required, perks fees paid at the time of recording, and the homeowners association covenants will be reviewed by staff. And again, those were included as part of your recommended motion. I do have the applicant's representative in the audience. I do not believe he's got a presentation, but if you do have questions, he would be available to answer those.
Thank you. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this item, but I will open it up for anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and speak on this prior to opening it up to council. I see no one, so I will open it up to council for questions. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. Do you have any idea if there's going to be any on-site parking other than perhaps a garage? We can't tell from this.
Each of the garages, as you saw, the way the project is designed is there's an access drive that comes off Moore Street, and then each of the garages for the individual units has 2 parking spots enclosed, and there will also be street parking along Moore Street.
By my count, that makes about for 4 cars. Where's the rest of them going to go? I mean, just looking at the lengths here, the lot lengths are only 68 feet, 65 feet. My garage is 25 feet deep, so I could potentially see above the alley and below the alley, 2 cars could park out there on a permanent basis or whatever, but that doesn't seem like a lot for 11 units. It's kind of the same argument I had to make over off of 38th a while back. It just is insufficient parking.
It does meet the standards in the zoning code with the additional on-street parking.
Thank you. Is there additional questions? Mr. Matthews?
I saw in here that it's stated that they've got notes in the plans that for future development, this can only be attached townhome products. How stable would that note be in the future? I mean, how easy it to overturn that and change? For instance, like Fruitdale Lofts, it was only supposed to be used for educational properties, and we paid to have that deed condemned. How much weight does this thing carry?
Well, it's a recorded document, so any purchaser or the current developer has to abide by that regulation. If the development scenario would change, say for example, they wanted to do duplexes instead, they would have to come back and re-subdivide and come back through the process.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question may be for the city attorney. Relative to the development note that talks about the construction defect relative to the multifamily use on the property, that particular development note on the plat, that doesn't preclude any commercial development on that property. It only speaks to the what to do in the case of a construction defect relative to multifamily, but it doesn't preclude the property from being used in a commercial way, correct?
That's correct. I mean, it's construction defects with respect to residential construction. And so to the extent this property were rezoned and commercial development were built, then, you know, this note wouldn't constrain some kind of commercial development construction defect.
Well, given that this is a mixed-use property, one could place commercial in conjunction with residential. So how would that be litigated or bisected if the multifamily is made in conjunction with commercial?
Well, the defect you'd have to allege would be to the residential component, and I get it that if it's mixed use, that would make you'd have to put on witnesses to talk about which side of the common wall, and it'd be an interesting trial with a lot of kind of factual arguments, but the legal principle would be if they'd have to prove that it was the defect in the residential. Conceivably, I suppose, making up a case, you could say a defect somehow in the commercial roof affects in some way the residential. That's getting pretty artful and making up a lot of facts, but the legal principle that it's construction defects for residential is what would remain.
Okay. And that was just a question that I had, and it seems like in the current design that commercial is not a considered a use in this particular plan, but I just was concerned about it as it relates to mixed use. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is there additional questions for staff before I close the public hearing and we have a motion? We're going to close the public hearing. Ms. Dozeman, a motion is in order.
Yes, thank you. I move to approve resolution number 62-2018, a resolution approving an 11-lot subdivision plat for property zone mixed-use neighborhood at 10590 West 44th Avenue, case number WS-17-03/Clear Creek Townhomes for the following reasons. 1, City Council has conducted a proper public hearing, meeting all public notice requirements as required by Section 26-109 and 26-407 of the Code of Laws. 2, the requested subdivision has been reviewed by the Planning Commission, which has forwarded its recommendation for approval. 3, all requirements of the subdivision regulations have been met. 4, utility districts can serve the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. With the following conditions. 1, a note should be added to the previous right-of-way dedication for 44th Avenue with the reception number of the dedication. 2, a subdivision improvement agreement be executed with required security prior to recordation of the subdivision plat. 3, the developer shall pay parks fees at the time of plat recording in the amount of $27,470.19. 4, the homeowners association covenants shall be reviewed and approved by staff prior to issuance of a building permit.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries, that's right, isn't it? 7-1 with Councilmember Matthews voting no.
Thank you.
I thought I cleared it.
We've been working for a little over 2 hours. I'd like to take about a 10-minute recess. Then let's go back to 5. Okay. Then we will move to item number 5. Thank you for the correction. Mr. Matthews, would you please introduce item number 5?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 5 is Council Bill number 27-2018, an ordinance approving the amendment to the outline, I better put my glasses back, there we go. An amendment to the outline development plan for the Camelot Club Apartments, planned residential development PRD for property located at 4635 and 4665 Kipling Street, case number WZ-18-03/Kipling Villages. This is an ordinance on first reading. Briefly, so the folks out in TV land know, the issue is the applicant is requesting approval of an amendment to the outline development plan for the Camelot Club Apartments located on Kipling Street. The purpose of the amendment is to expand the uses allowed within the 2 buildings on the property, to adjust for the sign allowance, and to modernize the original plan development document. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. This is a ordinance on first reading. Would you please provide me with a motion?
Excuse me. I move to approve Council Bill number 27-2018, an ordinance approving an amendment to the outline development plan for the Camelot Club Apartments, planned residential development for property located at 4635 and 4665 Kipling Street, on first reading for the sole purpose of ordering it published and for a public hearing set for Monday, November 26, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the City Council chambers.
There's a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. Now we will move to item number 6. Mr. Pond, please introduce item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 64-2018, a resolution levying general property taxes for the year 2018 to help defray the costs of government for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2019 budget year.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, do we have a brief presentation on this?
Just very, very brief, Mr. Mayor. This is an annual requirement to set the property tax mill levy for the city, which is at 1.830 mils, which is one of the lowest in the metropolitan area. Sorry?
Thank you. Are there...
I wasn't finished. Was somebody asking me something? Janelle, were you saying something?
We haven't asked it yet, but we may. Are there...
So we're... I'm hearing things, I think. I'm sorry. Okay. As you know, Tabor does not allow City Council to increase the city's mill levy without a vote of the residents. So we are asking you to set the mill levy at what it currently is, 1.830. We're projecting that will generate just over $1 million from property tax revenue in 2019.
Thank you. Do we have questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Mr. Pond.
Thank you. I move to approve resolution number 64-2018, a resolution levying a mill levy of 1.830 on general property taxes for the year 2018 to help defray the costs of government for the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for the 2019 budget year.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please poll? Ms. Davis.
Well, since I was mumbling, I guess I wasn't mumbling very quietly. I said it's the lowest in the world. But I just do want to comment because I think a lot of people don't know this because like you all, like myself, keep seeing my taxes increasing and I keep thinking, what the heck? And I, of course, if I didn't know better, might assume that the city of Wheat Ridge is getting those. Patrick, can you give us a dollar amount of how much per, I think it was like $40 per 200,000 of average price of a home. You know, so if your house was 400,000, you give $40 a year to Wheat Ridge.
Yep,
Something
no,
like
that's, yep, I was just calculating because I couldn't remember. $400,000 house in Wheat Ridge would pay about $58 a year to the city of Wheat Ridge. Yeah, your annual tax bill, of course, is much larger because most of your taxes go to the school district and the county. But the city of Wheat Ridge gets about $58 for a $400,000 house.
So I just want to emphasize that again to everyone, because that's $400,000 house. You pay about $58 in property taxes that goes to the city. I will say that's, you actually pay more to the library, which is good. The library is good too. But just how important, just keep that in your mind, because again, we have streets, we have sidewalks, we have bridges, we have police, we have all of these things that we like to sustain. We've had that word today as well in our city, and at this point, a $400,000 house contributes $53 to that. Although their comments about sales tax and those kinds of things, that's where our dollars come from, and even that is limited because we're a very small city. So I wanted to put that food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. We will move to agenda item number 7. Mr. Urban, would you please introduce item number 7?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see. Resolution 65-2018, a resolution opposing Amendment 74, an attempt to amend the Colorado Constitution to drastically limit state and local government services at a high cost to taxpayer. At issue, Amendment 74 is a citizen proposed measure for the November statewide ballot, which would amend the takings law in Colorado Constitution to allow private property owners to sue state and local governments when their fair market value of their property is reduced by some governmental action. Because of the unknown consequences and severe fiscal and administrative impacts of 74 upon both the state and municipalities, the Colorado Municipal League and the City of Wheat Ridge opposes Amendment 74.
Thank you. Mr. Goff, do we have a...
We do.
presentation on
First of all, I would like to introduce, a couple of you have met her, I think, but Mary Ann Schilling is our new assistant to the city manager. If you can see her back there, replaced Carly Lorenz. And I punished her and made her wait I put her item on very last of the agenda, so she had to sit through the whole meeting. But she does have a quick, brief summary of this bill.
All right, good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Mary Ann Schilling, Assistant to the City Manager. On October 1st, following discussion, City Council provided direction to staff to draft a resolution in opposition of Amendment 74, and so we're back with that resolution. As was discussed last week, Amendment 74 seeks to amend the Colorado Constitution to require just compensation if private property has, quote, reduced fair market value by government law or regulations, unquote. This could have a large impact on our municipalities, specifically in Colorado, and it would additionally have issues as they relate to land use cases. In this amendment language, the notion of fair market value is not defined, and the amendment does not specify which regulations are implicated. Litigation costs could have a high impact on the city of Wheat Ridge, and it could lead to a reduction of programs and services to our citizens and our community. Staff recommends council approve resolution number 65-2018 to oppose Amendment 74.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions, I have want to open this up for public comment, and I have Mr. John Clark signed up to speak on this. Mr. Clark?
You guys were all waiting to see what I was going to talk on, and I appreciate you holding me off till the end. So, I am John Clark. Don't know which address you want now. I don't know if you want my business address at 7250 West 38th, because everybody else was given business addresses. But if you want my home address, it's where do I live? 4665 Swadley. So, I am here to speak on Resolution 65-2018, opposing Amendment 74. I find it funny how this city works sometimes, that we can talk about subjects for years. Lanes, pot, you name it, we can just go on and on and on. But the city manager mentions last week, 7 days ago, Amendment 74, and all of a sudden we have a resolution. 1 week, we have a resolution. So I actually have, I know it's illegal to gamble in the city of Wheat Ridge, but I have 25 cents riding on this that I can't sway any of your votes. So I just grabbed a few things out of the Denver Post, and I'll just read them for you. It says, most people in Colorado don't know the government can take up to 90% of the value of their property without compensating them for their loss. When confronted with this information, most tend to react with skepticism, assuming such an extreme number must not be accurate. But it is. Amendment 74 is a reasonable guardrail to ensure the long arm of government can't reach in and devalue that for which you've worked for your entire life. Amendment 74 is about fairness. We all like to talk about fairness. At 11 words, it's the most straightforward measure on the ballot this year, and we strongly urge every voter to see that for themselves. It allows the David of a single person to at least have a shot against the Goliath of the government. Currently, in too many cases, there's not a method by which an individual property owner can attempt to be made whole when adversely affected by government action. Opponents to Amendment 74 have resorted to extreme rhetoric in an attempt to scare voters. But consider the source. Opponents of this measure have an entrenched interest in the status quo. Opponent groups are either comprised entirely of government members, like the Colorado Municipal League, or have government interest on their boards. They're desperate to continue escaping accountability for their actions. So, again, I have 25 cents writing on that you're not going to go my way. So I'd like to see if anybody has the guts to do it. But I would hope that somebody would move to table Resolution 65, 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the only speaker I had signed up to speak on this. Is there anyone here tonight who would like to come forth and speak on this issue? I see none, so I will open the okay. Well, Ms. Matthews, please come to the podium and introduce yourself and give us an address, and you may continue.
I'm Carol Matthews, 3851 Hoyt Street, Wheat Ridge. And I would like to finish my last paragraph where I talked about how dare the city want us to vote against rights when we can't trust you. How can you ask Wheat Ridge citizens to give you more tax dollars and to vote against citizens' rights for compensation for losses sustained by government actions when you will not protect our rights and interests? You ask us to give you our trust and our money. We need the confidence that our city government will do the job we pay you to do: enforce laws, zonings, and codes, protect our property, our family, and our business, not the opposite. I contend the city of Wheat Ridge should be really against 74 because they're going to destroy the businesses all along along Wadsworth Avenue with this continuous lane project and the medians. Our city contracted specialists have said that by putting this lane in there and stopping access to our businesses and putting a median down the center, you will destroy future projects for businesses in Wheat Ridge forever. Now consider that and the parking you're going to take away from those businesses that you take when you widen the street. You've given access to only the new guys. 35th Avenue, you're putting all this housing and all multi-family housing and all, and restricting the traffic flow. It's going to push it over onto private streets. You've already put a stoplight there that congests traffic on 38th. You refuse to improve the streets and give us welfare in our city to be able to walk and ride safely on our streets. But yet, this is your project. And until you can protect our citizens and our businesses and guarantee us that your traffic taming and all this other stuff is helping our health and welfare, we will not vote and give away our rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this issue tonight who has not signed up? I don't see any, so I'll open it up for questions for staff. I had one from Ms. Schilling. Ms. Schilling, this is a proposed amendment to the Colorado Constitution. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So this would require a 55% vote to enact, and a 55% vote to overturn it. Should it come into law? And is there not a provision in the Colorado Constitution and in the United States Constitution to provide fair and equitable compensation in the event that government has a taking from an individual?
That does exist.
Mr. Goff, do you have some information on that?
Yes, we do. Mr. Dahl probably can speak a little more clear than we can.
Sure. The U.S. Constitution has it's always had the provision that the private property may not be taken for public use without just compensation. Colorado's Constitution and every state's Constitution that I'm aware of has a similar provision. Colorado's is actually slightly broader than the U.S. Constitution's, and it says that private property may not be taken or damaged for public use without just compensation. So it's the extent of Colorado's takings law in the Constitution is slightly greater, and that forms the basis both federally and at the state level for condemnation actions. And the city, of course, has undertaken a few condemnation actions in the past, not many. Usually it's for streets. Occasionally, I think the city once condemned some covenants so that it could build the sound wall protecting the neighborhood behind the Applewood neighborhood, just behind the Youngfield development on the other side of I-70. Actually, that wall had to be put in place, and the local covenants wouldn't allow it, and so the city used condemnation for that purpose to acquire the right to build that wall. But federally and nationally, the condemnation law is all about taking or damaging private property for public use, and this obviously would expand that the scope of those cases considerably, and that's why the league has made it its opposition priority.
And when the government comes and needs to enlarge a road, I mean, the property owners along Wadsworth, should we proceed with that road widening and needed to acquire property, would they be paid for their property?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Are there any more questions, Ms. Dozeman?
Could you give an example as to some sort of government regulation or law that would decrease the fair market value or the compensation?
Sure. Regulations that are short of what we've been talking about, the condemnation where you actually acquire the land. The city has undertaken many of those actions in the past, primarily in the land use arena. The city restricts sexually oriented businesses. If I own a property that's restricted from use sexually oriented businesses, I can't use it for that purpose. So that particular use has been taken away. In the late 90s, the city changed the zoning designation to require special use permits for body art establishments and psychic advisors, requiring them then to get a special use permit, which is a burden on their land that wouldn't have been true. Otherwise, it was just another commercial use. It's a use by right. That was taken away by the city when it imposed the requirement for a special use permit for those uses, and that's a diminution in the available uses on that property, and you have to go through then a government regulation to be able to have that permission. Tonight, the city imposed the requirement as a condition of subdivision that there was parkland dedication, sidewalk dedication, drainage dedication, curb and gutter dedication on that particular property. That's a government regulation that's, of course, it has its home in the city's land use code, but those are the kinds of things that do impose conditions on and therefore affect the value of property. that the city commonly engages in. And these are the kinds of things that cities across the country use commonly to regulate property nuisance requirements, et cetera, but they all end up affecting the use of the property and making it less useful for certain purposes and costing some money in the interest of the public good.
So just a follow-up question, then would those, would that decrease in value be taken into consideration if we were to acquire the property at a later date? Like in eminent domain, or would we be assessing it off of the fair market value?
Interesting question. In eminent domain, you are required to pay for the value of the property, the fair market value of the property. Typically, in an eminent domain case, it's each side hires an appraiser. The government's required to hire the appraiser for the condomnee, the property owner. And if there's the government's first required to make an offer, and if that's refused, then you go into condemnation, and 2 appraisers are hired, and either a judge or a condemnation commission appointed by a judge makes the decision of what the actual value is, and that is what the government must pay. To the extent the property has been diminished somehow in value because of property owners' actions or prior government actions, you're looking at the property as it exists. And clearly, a property that has no zoning restrictions at all is worth something. A property that's been zoned only for residential purposes, its value is primarily that. Understanding, though, that zoning is typically sought by property owners, asking to have their property zoned for some use. And so it's private owners typically are the ones asking for a zoning designation that much later, and they build to that, much later that becomes the use of the property, the fair market value of which you're required to pay in condemnation.
Ms. Dozeman.
Sorry. I also want to know, like, what harm would you say that this amendment would do specifically to the city of Wheat Ridge? Like, is there a foreseeable harm, or, I mean, is this a situation that, we're just talking about it because other organizations are opposing it, but it does no real harm to us because we haven't encountered it?
Sure. Absolutely fair question. I think a lot of people are asking that and kind of thinking about it. There's no question the amendment has to do something, otherwise it wouldn't be proposed. It has to have an effect, and as in reading the words, the amendment broadens the scope of claims and broadens really the depth of them. And so to the extent that value is changed at all, then the government must pay for that. In terms of real live potential impacts on the city, the best analysis I can give you is that the exercise of your land use actions is really the heart of this. And every time you take a land use action to require, okay, now we're going to start requiring dedication of 6 feet curb and gutter when there's new development, or, because it's an ADA standard, we're going to do that, or we're not going to allow development in or have additional requirements in the floodplain. That's an effect on the value of that property. And I perceive that one of the immediate impacts will be a disincentive for the city to make an amendment to its land use code, like requiring a special use permit for the tattoo parlor psychic advisors, because that's a diminution. So on a kind of a going forward basis, to try to answer your question, I and others that are in the arena and looking at this have felt that it will be a disincentive to take new land use actions. It will be a disincentive to make changes to your land use code that we're constantly doing. As you know, there's probably 2 or 3 amendments to the land use code every year, probably more than that. Tonight, you changed you made changes to the marijuana operation rules, and it's not limited to land use. It's any government regulation. So to stop answering your question and summarize, I think there will be a disincentive to take regulatory actions that would have any impact on property rights. And you're required to do, or you in the past do that all the time on a whole range of subjects, from updating your building code to now require an hour-and-a-half fire code or firewall, if that's the new code. Well, that's a regulatory change that's going to cost money for private industry. I absolutely get it. But it's also a diminution in value if it's going to cost money. So it's the disincentive to exercise your traditional land use building control powers as they must evolve and further modernize that I see as a impact on the city.
But I think it's important to understand too that this amendment is exclusively backed by the oil and gas industry, because there's many entities in Colorado that are trying to limit where they can drill, and so this is funded by the oil and gas industry. You know, people may think that's fine, but it's for the benefit of the oil and gas industry at this point. Some people may think it's going to protect all property owners, but the intent at this point is to help the oil and gas company. They did this similar thing in Oregon about 3 years ago. They had over 7,000 claims after this became law, and it was about $20 billion worth of compensation. So a lot of entities in Oregon deregulated, and they had some kind, agribusinesses develop oil and gas businesses locating in areas that their communities didn't want. So it really backfired in Oregon. They're trying to get rid of it there. So those are some of the things that we've been hearing. That it sounds like it's good for the average property owner, but this is really for the oil and gas industry.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is for the city attorney as it relates to existing actions or previous actions prior to this amendment. How do those actions that have devalued a property come into play after the passage of this amendment?
That's really good. That's a very good question. It's been debated a lot in the circles of people that are looking at, okay, if this passes, what are the impacts? Trying to look at, will past regulatory actions now be compensable in the future? If in the past you changed the rules on psychic advisors on my property, do I have a claim? The sort of going in thinking is that, law is deemed to be prospective unless it says that it isn't. And we kind of went over this in a prior case in Wheat Ridge and really dug into the things can be retrospective, but not, they can be looking backward, but not retrospective. And, we dug into that. It's clearly going to have to get litigated if it goes forward, because there will be claims from people that have been previously regulated that want to bring those claims. I'd like to think that the general rule, unless it says it's retrospective, it isn't. Or retroactive, excuse me, it isn't. And I think that's probably more likely to be the rule. I don't want to unfairly expand the parade of horribles. I think there are enough concerns just going forward. I'm a little more confident that we won't see prior regulatory actions now brought to you to pay for them. I think it's going to be on a going forward basis. Oh, you're going to adopt a new UBC. Okay, that's got how many new requirements? That's going to cost how much more? That's compensable.
Thank you.
Mr. Ann?
Yeah, I have a question. So us as a council opposing this amendment, that doesn't commit us in any way, shape, or form, correct, moving forward?
No, it does not, and there's two considerations. One's the Fair Campaign Practices Act, and you all well know, because I've told you many times over the years, you have the right, you can't spend public money to urge electors to vote for or against, with some exceptions. One of those exceptions is passing a resolution supporting or opposing, and that's, the league wouldn't be suggesting to do this if there were that. It also doesn't, the city's opposition, if it chooses to pass the resolution, doesn't preclude you from taking future, from adopting that new building code in any way, or not adopting it. But if the Constitution is amended, your action in supporting or opposing this is not a feature of, or would not be a feature of, a compensation claim that would be brought, against the city. You wouldn't be held, you wouldn't benefit or be harmed by by what the position you'd taken. It would all be about, well, how does this regulation affect that property, and does it diminish its value, in which case the city pays.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
Motion in order?
Motion is in order.
I move to approve Resolution Number 65-2018, a resolution opposing Amendment 74, an attempt to amend the Colorado Constitution to drastically limit state and local government services at a high cost to taxpayers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start out by saying I love the concept of Amendment 74. I love it greatly. I think eminent domain and condemnation have been used and abused way far too much in the past. I have seen people with perfectly good properties lose their businesses trying to fight a condemnation or an eminent domain case. They won, but they were out of money. They just couldn't outspend the city for legal fees. One of the things URA does is declare a lot of stuff as blight that may not be a blight, and try and use that to devalue the property, and also as an ancillary reason to condemn a property. I really, really love the concept of 74. I would love to vote no on this so I can maintain my standing as our resident grumpy old man. I'd like to see another Christmas light up there. I would love to vote no on this because I'd like to see Mr. Clark get his 25 cents. Unfortunately, even though I think this vote would probably go about 7-1, I just can't bring myself to support an amendment that is so poorly written. And I think the ambiguity and language in that amendment is so bad, I just can't support it. So I will not be a grumpy old man, and I will be voting yes on this resolution.
Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, like Larry said, there's a lot in Amendment 74 that the average taxpayer or property owner might agree with, in that the general sense that you don't want the government to take from you, and if they do so, it should be justly compensated. But what gets lost, and I don't think without having served in this role, I wouldn't be privy to it, but the number and the ways in which people try to either sue the city at the present without this amendment, and the way in which individuals will try to gain any claim or any type of angle to sue the city and try to get money from us is a cottage business for some, and it's very irritating to me to see these folks who could be otherwise out earning a hard-earned living choosing instead to spin their wheels trying to sue the city for unfounded claims. And we've had case after case of this over the years. So, you know, even without Amendment 74, we already have folks who are continuously try to gum up the works or trying to sue us for this, that, or the other. So I'll be supporting this resolution to oppose Amendment 74.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions? Ms. Dozeman.
So I'd like to echo some of Larry's comments in the fact that I really support that this incentivizes a deregulation. I do believe in personal private property rights, and I feel as if sometimes we kind of impose things ex post facto on our citizens and our business owners. They buy a business or they buy a property, and then we kind of change the rules on them and disallow them to have some of what I believe were their rights when they originally purchased the property. And I have the same feeling of Larry, as I would love to see something of this nature be built into our Constitution, our state Constitution. But it is so ambiguous in the language. While it is straightforward and simple, I think that it's too vague in the fact that it doesn't outline exactly what can be litigated, and there's just a whole array of things that could be both harmful to personal property owners as well as the government. So I will also be supporting this.
Additional? All right. We have, looks like we've come to the time to vote. Would the clerk please poll the council?
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you. That concludes our business items on tonight's agenda. We will go to city managers' matters. Mr. Goff.
I don't have anything this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. City attorney's matters. Mr. Dahl.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Elected officials, we'll start with our clerk, Ms. Shaver.
I just wanted to let people know that starting next week, the ballots will be being mailed out, and we will not have a ballot box in the clerk's office. The county has asked to not do that. I think, I shouldn't assume anything, but I think it's to save the folks who come and empty the box every day. It saves them time from having to come in and get another box. And time is money, and hours and so on, and trying to cut costs. So there are people that came in last year and said, "Where's the box?" And I said, "We don't have one." And there was one gentleman who was pretty upset because he didn't think the outside box was very secure, but they come every single day and empty that as soon as the ballots are. And there's a television camera in my office that feeds right to the county, so they know when people have started to drop their ballots. So it's a pretty good system, and so be advised that you can drop your ballot off 24/7. There are a number of other ballot boxes spread throughout the county. I think there's one in Lakewood at their city hall in Arvada, and there's one out at the county, and a couple other places down south, and in probably Evergreen, and a lot of different places. But and you can put those in. Don't take your ballot to Denver and put it in their box, because it won't get counted in time. That's happened. Yeah, I got in an envelope. Somebody couple years back, somebody had their Wheat Ridge ballot, and they put it in a ballot box in Sedalia, and like 6 months later, I got this envelope with this person's ballot, and it was from the clerk in Sedalia. Anyway, so just people should watch for that, and if you're going to mail it in the U.S. Postal Service, do it right away, so make sure it gets there. Otherwise, I would recommend dropping it in a box.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
We'll start with Mr. Ann.
Yes, I wanted to ask, West Metro Fire is having, they've got a ballot question, 7C, which I would like us to consider a resolution in support of that. It's not a tax increase like it was mentioned, it's just a freeze on the existing property tax that they have, just so that they can maintain what they're doing for us now. So I would like us to consider doing that in support. I mean, our firefighters work really hard for us. And, they put their life in danger for our businesses and our homes. So I would like to see us do that.
And I support that request from Mr. Rand.
Okay. Is that something, Mr. Fitzgerald, that we would get on the?
I was going to make a note right this very minute.
Okay.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I was going to make a note right this
Okay.
minute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy, anything tonight?
Two things. So it is October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Family Tree has their On the Town, which is a fundraiser for their domestic violence programs, and it is on the 10th at 5:30 at the Lamar Street Station. Tickets are $60. You can go to thefamilytree.org to purchase your tickets, or if you search them on Facebook under The Family Tree, they are selling the tickets through their Facebook also. And then the next thing is With the elections coming up, and we have 2 people that are sitting in elected officials' seats that are going to be on the ballot for different seats, then I think it's important that before they get voted in, we have a process, we have a conversation about what the process is to appoint into an open elected official's seat. I would hope that someone here would support me in adding that conversation to our study session and soon.
Yes, I would support that.
Sorry, I was going to say, we already got the 2, and we put it on October 15th for discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question for the city manager. In the resolution we passed tonight regarding levying the general property taxes, it indicated that the total assessed value for the city was $552 million, and last year in the resolution it indicated it was $558 million, but the decrease indicated in the memo was $7.7 million. So I didn't know, number one, why is it lower than it was last year, and number two, from my numbers, it went down by 5.8 million, and we have 7.7 million here.
Yeah, the 552, that number changes from what you got last year because there's additions and deletions throughout the year. So the assessment that we get from the county, we got it in August 27th, I believe. That number changes from what it was the previous year because of activity throughout the year. So the 7 million, this is the off year from the assessment. If you have last year's with you too, the increase last year was like 150 million or something in assessed valuation because of just the increase in property value. So it was a very large increase. I think this might just be, I can't tell you exactly why we have a $7 million increase, but I think it's probably a readjustment because property values had increased so much that one year. Okay. So I had the same question when I looked at it too, but there was a significant increase in last year's assessed valuation, much more than this decrease. It was 150 million, I think, and so it's kind of a small decrease compared to what it increased last year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
That's it for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have a question for Mr. Goff. I've been getting some questions from my constituents about the lack of construction activity over by Lucky's. Can you fill us in a little bit as to why there's not much going on over there?
Anything in particular? I mean, most of the retail buildings are up. They're doing a lot of the interior work.
There's been no movement on the residential side.
No, the residential just got their permits about a week ago, so they should start construction any day now. I believe last time I talked to the developer, I think they were trying to work something out with the builder for the apartments, but they just got their permit about a week ago, so that should start soon.
Do we know a percent of those little strip businesses that have been rented with their?
I think I believe almost 80 to 90%. The Verizon store should open soon. They have the Five Guys Burgers, I think, has signed a lease. There's this smoothie sandwich place that's currently in Arvada. They're going to open a second store in Wheat Ridge. They've signed a lease. The Pierogi place, which is down the street on Wadsworth, has signed a lease. I believe they got a lease for a salon, a nail place, a barber. And so, yeah, it's just taken a while on tenant finishes and getting those companies to do their tenant finishes.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you. Ms. Dozeman?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple things. I just want to put in a plug for our National Walk to School Day, which is Wednesday, October 10th. So it's not just walk, but walk or roll. I'm trying to use any other modes of transportation to get your kiddos to school. I will be walking my son to school. Luckily, we live close enough to do that. And then I wanted to ask Patrick what the process would be to move forward with the fairway swish courts, if we need to put that on a study session to identify a basketball court, or if that could be done administratively, what that might look like.
Well, we looked into it. We really don't have any basketball courts eligible right now. you saw in the budget presentation, we are going to do some improvements to tennis courts, but my understanding, this is pretty specific to basketball courts, and they want this turned around in the next 60 days, is my understanding. And we just don't have any courts that need refurbished at this point. And I think 2020 is the soonest that we project probably the next improvements on a basketball court.
So it was my understanding that the basketball courts are going to be staying at Anderson Park, but not being renovated. So I thought that maybe that might be a good.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe they don't need to renovate it. I'll ask on those courts specifically if those are ones that you had in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Sorry, Patrick, you're getting more questions.
That's all right.
So I just want some clarification on some of the discussion in the public comment today, and I think a lot of it was around the Airbnb, because I think it's something that I think the entire council supports regulating, and something that we discussed in our retreat or little get-together, whatever you call it, for a day and a half on a weekend one time. And I believe it was also going to be a part of the NRS study, the revitalization study, to be a part of that. So I guess from that standpoint, I do believe that it is something, I mean, I can't speak to, I do think it's odd, but I don't know what the course was that we were offering in Wheat Ridge about how to have a B&B, but I can't speak to that. But I do think I could speak, and you can also speak to it and clarify that that is something that we're looking into regulating. And I know that several of us went to a conference in San Francisco where even the Airbnb people said, please, yes, do call us, because we'd rather have you getting taxes from us than having it be a Craigslist type of situation that is maybe not as safe for your community. So please invite us in, let's talk, let's get regulated. So that is a part of that study, correct? And then I guess it is also it was a part of our strategies as well.
Correct, yeah. City Council identified a policy on shared housing, including ADUs, also accessory dwelling units, as a priority, and it became one of your top 5 priorities. And my understanding, though, was that council wanted to wait until we had more discussion through the NRS process to get information from the community more information on the community. As you remember, we put a question on the citizen survey. We got results back a couple of months ago, and so we have that data also. And I mean, it's something if council wants it to bring forward sooner than later. But my understanding was we were going to wait until some of the conversations were had in the community. We don't currently regulate them, but we do have specific areas in our code that address B&Bs and other rentals. But we don't believe refer specifically to the short-term rental industry. And most of the communities surrounding us are kind of in the same boat. They're kind of waiting and seeing, and there are short-term rentals in all of our communities. Lakewood doesn't regulate them either at this point. Denver does, of course, as we know, and they've made many changes over the last couple of years. So
do you think that's a part of the scope of the NRS? I guess I'm not of that group that they're talking about that. I mean, I do know, like, one of the folks we appointed that I personally had coffee with, they came from like Seattle, and they were talking about how there's actually a staff member, and I think it was suggested today that there's a staff member that goes on Airbnb and makes sure that if there's any Wheat Ridge address, that this person is licensed, and that they do have that they're regulated by the city. And so I guess, I mean, as a part of that study and a part of that group, is that some of the discussion going on of what that might look like?
It's not a specific question that's in their mission necessarily, but their mission is to look at and to reach out to the community to listen and hear about what is working in the city and what is not working, and what kind of things we should change and not change. And I guess we're hoping that these types of discussions will come up, since they're on everybody's minds, and including bulk plane and residential height and accessory dwelling units and short-term rentals. These are all issues that council can move forward with sooner though, if that's up to you guys. I haven't received that direction. If that's something you want to pull off and do before you get more information from the community, we can do that.
Thank you. Unless you had, did you have?
No, I think that's it. I just think that, I just don't want to drag too far on. I mean, I think that it's something that we were seriously wanting to do. If I need to grab a council person to say, you know what, staff, start studying it because it's coming, and not wait for them, then I will. I mean, but I think that to sit and wait, you know, when we know, okay, what are the next steps? Because I don't think there's a one of us that doesn't think that somehow it should be monitored or regulated, and we already know we have loosey-goosey language, so that needs to be tightened up. So I guess if I need to grab somebody to say,
we agree too.
you know.
But I know there's some council members that want to wait, so I need direction from the full council. If this is a policy discussion you want to have, I need direction. I know there's a few of you that want to wait also. So if that's
I
something.
mean, I guess what would we be waiting on?
I get just more community conversations, and once the NRS report comes back, and if I can't guarantee that this is going to be a major discussion point out there. I'm not part of those neighborhood meetings, but we're hoping that maybe that is. If it's so, I can't guarantee that they're going to come back with more information that we don't have today. That's going to say yes, let's do this, or don't do this.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Do we have data for them? Like, so if I went on Airbnb and I searched Wheat Ridge,
Yep.
do we have data for folks of how many places pop up?
Well, the problem is there's 50 to 70 services out there that provide similar to Airbnb. Airbnb is the one we all know about and we all hear
Right.
about, but there's companies out there that have been trying to get our business for the last couple of years, and they're at every conference I go to, and probably that San Francisco one that we were at. That will help you do that. And so, yeah, there's resources out there. We have studies in our hand that the ski industries have done, because that's where most of the Airbnbs were, the municipalities in the ski areas. We have a lot of data. We're just waiting for direction to have a serious discussion about it.
I mean, I think part of the situation is you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't know that we're not regulating 250 Airbnbs in Wheat Ridge, then yeah, maybe I'm not going to bring it up in NRS because it doesn't happen in my neighborhood. It actually does. So I guess I understand what you're saying, that yeah, let's just wait till they bring it back. But I think that, I mean,
Again, I thought that was the direction.
no, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just wondering, you know, on some things that we know we really feel strongly about, hey, is this a way that we can regulate, we can tax, another way to generate revenue, to make our community safe? I don't think that's anything that any one of us on this dais doesn't disagree with, that we can't be more proactive than reactive and wait for a group of folks to come to us and say, yeah, maybe you should consider that, when I think all of us have already heard that, wow, we got kind of loosey-goosey language, and as language when bed and breakfast was a different meaning than Airbnb now, you know. So I guess I would just like to have us be more proactive than, because then how long is that going to take? We're going to wait for this group to get together, and then we're going to kind of divvy out. I mean, I think some things like and I know people want to go home, sorry, but I think some things like, you know, the bulk plane and things like that are going to be a little tougher conversations, and the ADUs, because those are going to have other things. But I think that Airbnbs are something that is a low-hanging fruit.
We can bring it forward
personally.
if you'd like to.
Tim, would you bring it
Ms.
forward
Fitzgerald,
with me?
Let's have a little discussion about this now, then.
Will you bring it
Yeah.
forward?
I think all of us want to tax Airbnbs in some way. We talked about taxing them like hotels. But you got to think also about the fact that that it's really just one step, and the next step is ADUs. And so, you know, we wanted to bring this,
So let's take a step.
we wanted to treat all of these things in a holistic manner after we have citizen input about these things. There's going to be a lot of controversy about that, because we saw today that there are people who are against Airbnb, and of course people who want to do it are for it, but people who want to protect their neighborhood are against it. So this is something that is going to take a long time to discuss.
Well, I think I would like to request, and Larry is willing to join me, that we put it on a study session agenda. And if it even be for the fact of just starting to pull data and reviewing some things. It's not saying I have to make a decision, but at least on one side of the coin, we can start doing our homework as well, while the NRS group is doing their homework. So Larry has agreed to put it on it, to join me in putting it on a study session.
Okay, I'll make a note.
This will be my report and my comment so that we can get out of here. I will, cautionary, it's fine, we're going to talk about, you put it on the agenda, fine. We make this hard for our citizens to engage because they don't quite know where to go and when to come to. As everyone remembers, the NRS has got all of these folks who are going out and trying to engage in a bunch of conversations in order to bring information back to us. And I would hate to get anyone confused about which meeting they should show up to talk about which topic. I want to be expeditious about it. I think we should talk about it. It's clearly important. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, and I want to talk about it. But when we put something on a study session agenda, then it appears as though you got to come and talk about it there. Should I not take the invite from the person who's on the NRS, who's we've tasked to actually go out and engage our community? Which should I go to? I can't go to both. I'm busy. Should I go to this one or that one? And I think we make it confusing sometimes. It's why I've been reticent to bring some of these things forward, and why I kind of look towards more trying to get this information back in one swath, is because we make it hard for our citizens to know which meeting to go to and which one is more important than the other one. And that's my only caution. Should we talk about it? Yes. Should it be expeditious? Yes. But I just want to be careful about what message we're sending out, because if we go back, I wish everyone would go back to what the framework of the NRS, there's a lot of meetings and a lot of outreach that we've tasked that group with, and this should be part of it. I believe it is. I believe it is because it's part of the conversation that's been going on, and it's on the minds of people in our community. So my caution is that we start to make it confusing. So you guys have already done it. It's done. Let's do it. We'll talk about it. I just want to. My caution is that we're making it confusing for people about when to show up and talk.
A lot of my intent is to try to start pulling facts. It's not necessarily, that we're going to be gathering opinions, but it would be nice to start having the facts, because again, how can our community make a decision if they don't have some of the facts?
Okay, that's fine. Gathering facts I agree with, but if you put it on a study session, it's a public hearing, it's a public venue, and people see the agenda and they come up to it in order to talk. And so we're not just getting facts, we're getting opinions, which are good. That's great. We need opinions. But if now we've created two venues for opinions to come through, it becomes confusing. Should I go to the study session or should I participate in the NRS? Should I do both? Is one more important than the other? Are they going to listen to me if I come here? I think we've done this before. I think we've confused people, especially with this robust of an exercise.
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. I see no reason why we can't have two consecutive efforts going on at the same time. We always talk about we've got to get more people involved, and I hope this will be a way to do that. In the meantime, I believe the NRS study is not due to come out for almost a year. And in the meantime, we have realtors out there saying, folks, if you want to invest in a B&B, go to Wheat Ridge. They have no laws. It's the Wild West. You can do anything you want to. They don't enforce what laws they do have. And I don't think we want to maintain that type of reputation either. At least if we bring it up on a study session and get it on somebody's attention, it may give them fair warning that we are serious about someday we're going to do something. And there's just no reason why we can't try and work out from our end with working directly with staff what might be some of the gotchas, the unintended consequences. Well, NRS is working on it from a civilian standpoint.
Mayor Pro Tem, you have your direction? Good. Ms. Shaver?
I had one more. I forgot, in my rambling, I forgot to say, on Election Day, Council Chambers is going to be a full-service voter, it's VSPC, Voter Service and Polling Center. So people can actually come in that day and register if they've lived here 22 days, and they have to document that. But it'll be a full-service place on Election Day again.
Are we
County
having
likes
council the day before?
Not before, just that one day.
Are we having council the day before? Or do they have to set up? I know that's always a question.
We do have a meeting scheduled, and right now it's kind of an important meeting. I guess we could go somewhere else. We can't videotape it though. It's a joint meeting with the Planning Commission on the NRS, so it's kind of an important meeting that's already been scheduled.
Just as a side, last year they put
split
everything in the
Okay, all right.
in the glass conference room. They come like the day or night before, and then they wheel it in and
Okay.
set it up.
So we can accommodate that at City Hall.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to, everyone knows there's an election coming up in November. It's a complicated ballot, a lot of important issues on the ballot. I hope you'll be thoughtful and do your civic duty and your responsibility. It's one of the things that makes America great, a great society, is that we have the ability to go and vote and have representative democracy. So with that, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.